am going to call the meeting of the Maynard Town of Finance Committee to order at 7:01 p.m. So as a preliminary matter, this is Jillian Prendergast. I am the chair of the committee. Please permit me to confirm that all members and persons anticipated on the agenda are present and can hear me. Members, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Linda?
Yes.
Nathan?
Yes.
Katie?
Yes.
Peter?
Yes.
Khadija? Can you hear us okay, Khadija? All right, maybe some technical difficulties. All right, so I'll go through. So we also have some special guests tonight as well. So we have some special guests from the Assabet schools. So I know Ernest is here tonight to talk with us. So can you hear us okay tonight?
Yes, I can.
Excellent, thank you for coming. And then I see we also have some other guests tonight. Would you like to introduce them as well, or?
Sure. We have our esteemed colleague from Maynard, who's been serving on the school committee, district school committee, Pam Reniger, who's the Maynard representative. We also have our director of business operations, Maria Silva, joining us as well.
Excellent. Thank you so much, everyone, for coming. We really appreciate having the opportunity to talk with you tonight. So I'm going to go through and finish reading this remote meeting script, and then we'll jump into our agenda. So this open meeting of the Finance Committee is being conducted via Zoom. Speakers in the agenda will be participating remotely, and the chair may allow for the public to provide comment. The committee please note that while this option is being provided for remote attendance and our participation, as a courtesy to the public, the meeting hearing will not be suspended or terminated if technological problems interrupt the virtual broadcast to individual attendees unless otherwise required by law. Accordingly, please be aware that other folks may be able to see you, so please take care not to screen share your computer. Anything you broadcast may be captured by this recording. This meeting is currently being recorded and it will be later posted to the WAVM YouTube channel for people who are unable to attend the meeting in person. For meeting materials, you can find all of our supported documents on Board Docs, and that is linked through the town website under the Finance Committee webpage. We recommend that you follow along on the agenda as posted on Board Docs unless I note otherwise. We are now turning to the first item on the agenda. Before I do, please permit me to cover some ground rules for effective and clear conduct of our business and to assure accurate meeting minutes. I will introduce each speaker on the agenda. After they conclude the remarks, we can take feedback and questions from members. Please remember to mute your computer when you are not speaking, and please speak in a clear way that helps generate accurate minutes. And that is the script. So thanks for bearing with me through it. I feel like I should make a recording so I don't have to read it every week, but that's okay. So I think our first item on the agenda, of course, is talking to you all about the budget. And also we'd like to learn a little bit about the article that's being proposed as well at the annual town meeting. And if you would like, I can give you the permission on Zoom to be able to share your screen, or I can pull up the slides that you've shared, whatever you prefer.
Yeah, share screen would be great. I have it all queued up.
All right, so I will allow you to do that. So it should show up on the bottom of your screen now. Excellent.
How's that look? Can you see the front of our budget plan? Should say yes,
Yes, we can.
budget plan. Okay. Let me just I'm just gonna make your folks' windows a little bit bigger so I can put you on the other side so I can see it okay. Well, good evening and welcome. Well, I should say good evening and thank you. Once again, it's a privilege to come before you um, for the Maynard Finance Committee as well as the community of Maynard. We thank you for your continued support of Assabet over the past 50 years. Yes, we're celebrating our 50th anniversary this year. As I mentioned, Pam Reniger has been serving as your school committee representative for the past number of years and has done an outstanding job representing the town of Maynard. In developing our budget and over the past several years with the Finance Committee, we have talked about some challenges that have been happening and occurring over the past couple of years. And part of that challenge is the reduction of the amount of out-of-district students that Assabet has been taking. What that means is that we have a greater interest in Assabet from our in-district communities. In FY24, this current school year, we have 0 out-of-district students in our building. We're filled completely in the freshman class with all in-district students. So that's a direct correlation to what you've seen happening with the budget. And we'll kind of talk about that as we go. Just as a quick snapshot, a total number of students for Maynard as of the October 1st numbers. That's when we basically set our enrollment number, and any calculation for state aid is based on that October 1st number each year. We have 65 students as of October 1. That's a decrease of 3 students from Maynard. And the assessment that we originally had given back in December was a $1,395,961 estimate. The assessment that we're going to present to you tonight is actually $76,748 less. So the assessment you'll see is a $1,319,213. And basically your enrollment operating share, so to speak, is at a 6.4. But we'll kind of roll through the slides. And if you folks have any questions, just stop me midstream and we'll go ahead and answer those questions on the fly. The other thing that we've always shared, and it generally was generated by Mr. Stone, that used to be on the Finance Committee. He always wanted to know what the breakdown of our freshmen and whether or not they got their first or second choice. And I'm happy to tell you that 2 students of the 17 that you had listed, only 2 got their second choice. The remainder of them got their first choice. So it's always a high percentage for those folks getting into fields they're asking for. This is basically the superintendent's welcome. It's a letter that's in our larger budget book. I don't know if you folks can see this, but this is going to be, oh, I disappeared. Let's see. We'll try that again. Well, you can't really see it because of the way my thing is, but when we come to town Maynard meeting, we have a budget book that has some more graphs and some more information about our programs. In this presentation, it just kind of gets right down to the nuts and bolts, but basically our FY25 budget is an 8.5% increase over FY24. You'll see that it reflects the cost of living adjustments and required obligations, and it's a $2,137,140 increase, and we can explain on the next page how that rolls out. We have 2 positions that are grant funded that were part of ESSA that are being brought back into the operational budget, and we do have 3 additional staffing positions that we're looking to add in this budget. We're going to be moving into the 5th and final year of our transportation contract with a budgeted increase of 2.8%. And the one thing I can tell you is with Harvard Pilgrim Healthcare, we haven't settled on a percentage increase yet, but basically what we're seeing is that it's at a 10% or higher. We're hoping over the next couple of weeks we'll have a concrete number on healthcare. I will share that the costs for healthcare for our folks in the district, anyone hired prior to July 1, 2019, it's a 75-25 split. And anyone hired after that date, it is a 70-30 split. So there's more of a cost share on the employee. We are in the we're going to be moving in FY25 into the 3rd and final year of a 3-year teacher contract. So we will be opening negotiations next year to move into FY26, but it wouldn't affect this year's budget. The last thing, obviously, is we have a stabilization fund that we're looking to create, and we can kind of get into that in the last page. But there is an allocation of $250,000 for capital improvement expenditures as we decrease our reliability and out-of-district tuition and potential grant funds. Any questions so far? Okay, I'm going to move right along. So on the next page, these are the fast facts. So overall, we've had 48 additional students in district. As I mentioned, Maynard, you went down by 3 students, so this isn't reflected to you, but what it shows is it gives us an increase in our Chapter 70 funding. It has increased the minimum local contribution in some communities. And then the regional transportation rate, when the regional schools were built, they had made somewhat of a promise to fund 100% of a regional transportation reimbursement. But they have 2 words after that statement that says if appropriated by the state legislature. It has never been at 100%. This year and this year alone, it's been at 95%, which is the highest it's ever been. It's been as low as 60. And in the governor's numbers that she came out with, it was about 80%. So we're actually seeing a decrease of $6,136 for our transportation reimbursement rate, which any funds that's reduced, those funds or that assessment gets borne by our member communities. So we're seeing an increase in our budget of a $1.8 million, you know, 1.885447, just in our state aid and funding and what's required from that minimum local contribution. And if you remember the figure I just shared with you on the previous page, it was a 2.1. So it's really reflective of that $250,000. That's really the only difference that, you know, is beyond what the state is requiring us to have. These are the topics that we're going to kind of cover in here just real quickly. Our budget drivers, we've seen an increase of our multi-language learners. It's used to be EL learners, English language learners, ELLs, and now DESE has gone with MLLs and student with disabilities. We've seen our percentage of students requiring special education services decrease. However, the number of services that they're requiring has increased for those lesser amount of students. With Assabet, it's maintaining appropriate class sizes and co-taught ratios. We are a full inclusion school, so even though we have a very high special education rate of 24% in our population, in our academic classes, there are co-taught classes. So you have an academic or a core teacher in that class, and you would have a special education teacher in there as well. In the vocational or the technical programs, the percentage of students in those programs that requiring special education services could be as high as 60 or 70%, because we do not discriminate as to whether or not the student gets into a CTE program based on their educational needs. We have, as you know, as we're running a career and technical school, inflation of consumables or cost of materials has an impact on the budget. I can share with you, if anybody's doing any building and you're looking to buy sheetrock, it's going to be increasing within by 20% in the next couple of weeks based on what the supplier has shared with us. So if you need to go get sheetrock, it might be beneficial to go get it rather quickly. As I mentioned, this budget meets all contractual obligations and moves us closer to staffing levels and service levels based on student needs prior to COVID. And the capital improvement funds, as we rely on out-of-district tuition, as we rely less on out-of-district tuition. So our staffing adjustments, as I mentioned, these are 3 new positions, a paraprofessional in special education, an athletic trainer, and the elective instructor is going to be either a phys ed health teacher or potentially art teacher, depending upon how the program of studies and what courses students select. So this is, the elective teacher probably won't be determined until the May-June timeframe, but it is built into this budget. Here are the enrollment changes across the district. You can see Maynard is the fourth one down, starting from the left to the right, as you read. You can see that grade 9, 17, grade 10, 13, 20, 15, so on and so forth, for a total budget of 65 students. Last year it was 68 as of October 1, 2022. So you can see that there's a difference of -3 students. You do not happen to have any post-secondary, but I will point out to the bottom left-hand first column under grade 9, you'll see the 4 zeros there. That's the indication that we have no out-of-district students that are coming into the district for grade 9 into the FY25. So, sure,
Sorry, can I just ask a question on that for 1 second?
certainly.
Just to understand, is the no out-of-district students driven by a lack of availability or a lack of interest? Or
So actually, we have an abundance of interest in Assabet. In 2015, when I started, our in-district applications only numbered about 167. Currently, last year, we haven't got the final numbers for this year. The numbers so far for in-district, they've generally run about 453 applications in-district and about 157 out-of-district. So we have about 600 applications for 300 spots. Obviously, 300 spots, if we have that interest in our in-district, in our member communities, we have to take those in-district member community students first, based on the regional agreement. And then anybody after that 300 basically are put on a wait list with the chance of potential hope that they would get in if any of those spots were to open. So yeah, we have an abundance of interest from in-district. Yep.
Can I ask a follow-up? Do you allocate the number of slots per town? So does Maynard get a certain number of slots?
Yeah.
Or how do you allocate the 300 spots?
So in the regional agreement, there is no allocation of spots for member communities. When Assabet decided to take equity into the lens of folks getting into the admissions process to make sure that all students had the opportunity to apply and get into Assabet, what we did was, because there was no allocation, and because we were fearful that our larger communities of Marlborough and Hudson would potentially swallow up all of the spots, we created it was actually based on the renovation project. We took the 3 years prior enrollment of each community, and we got an average. So basically what we have is a minimum number of spots for the communities. So that way we know all communities have a number of spots to have kids to get in, students to get in, but that they couldn't be swallowed up by our largest 2 communities. And it changes each year based on the enrollment of we look at the past 3 years. So if Maynard's goes up, then the number of minimum spots would increase. If somewhat it goes down, it may decrease by a couple students, but there is always availability for member communities. And then if we don't fill them in the first pull, I mean, this year we have, this 305, so you'll see there's no out of district. So we don't have any general type process for that, but it's all pulled by the communities when we meet that minimum quota, and then that's how the slots are allocated. Okay.
Thank you.
Any other questions on that, or? Okay, moving along. So our statutory method of assessment is we use the statutory method of assessment, which basically is the minimum local contribution. And then on top of that, it's the above minimum contribution as required, which includes transportation, capital, debt service, other capital costs, and any other costs that are required in net school spending. And we'll talk a little bit more about that as we go.
Sorry.
That's okay.
Sorry, can I ask, pardon. Sorry, I just want to suggest a framing for this, particularly, I was looking at the assessments and the enrollment, and the price per student from town to town varies quite a bit.
Mm-hmm.
And Maynard seems to be on the more expensive side of that. So as we talk about this, can you keep that in mind, that that's something I'm going to want to come back to?
Yep.
And just, you know, it's an explanation of why, you know, Marlboro is like 10K and Maynard's paying 15 or 16K.
Yep, I'll get into
Okay.
it when we get into the following slides. Yep. So
All right, thank
basically, the MLC is the aggregate wealth model. It's based on your community. It is a formula that the state puts out, and if we were all sitting in a room, it would probably, and it was on an Excel spreadsheet, it would probably wrap around the room 3 or 4 times. Again, this is beyond what Assabet. This is what the state deals and sends to us, as well as you know, the Chapter 70 foundation formula of what we're going to be getting from the state. And basically, the aggregate wealth is based on your 50% property wealth and 50% local income wealth. So as you know, as each communities differ, that plays a major role into what your minimum local contribution looks like. And I'll share that on the next couple of slides. Again, the governor's budget was released in January 25th of 2024. And then there's some things that you could potentially click on if you wanted to get more in depth. This is Assabet Valley's Chapter 70 summary. So each school district has this available that communities could look at. Maynard has one as well that you could pull up. It will show you what FY 24 to 25 is. It gives you all of the, almost like a tax form on the left-hand side of that document, so you can see the breakdown. I generally stick to the right side because it's a comparison to 24 and 25. So as a whole for Assabet, as I mentioned, our enrollment increased by 48 students. It was 971 students in FY 24 and then 1,019. So based on that, the foundation budget went up $1,891,584. The required district contribution, which is basically what our communities are paying, right? That went up as well. The Chapter 78, we're getting $9,832,968 from the state. And then our required net school spending, every school has a requirement based on their community of what they're supposed to be spending to educate each particular student. That's the net school spending. So for Assabet, we're at foundation, which is 100%. Our budget tends to be 100 or 101%. I have a slide which will show you, and it's actually right here. And I haven't gotten an updated slide yet, but if you look, so the past couple of years, because we had been budgeting so close, we were actually below net school spending. Now, DESE will allow you to do that, but then the next following 2 years, you need to catch up. So in FY 24, we actually had to spend a little bit more in order to meet that 100% net school spending, which is not borne by the towns. But if I look at Maynard, which is the 4th one down, you can see that they're required for FY 23, they were required to spend 163.3% of net school spending. However, what was spent for Maynard was 185.1%. So you folks were 22% above what DESE's requiring you to spend on education, which is a great thing. It's a fabulous thing to happen that you're investing educational dollars. The only point I would make there is that Assabet's always at the very bare minimum, and that has been because we've had the ability to utilize out-of-district tuition money. However, that is going away as our out-of-district kids are no longer being enrolled in the district. So I just want to give that to a heads up for the Finance Committee that you're going to start to see us above that 100, 101, percent net school spending. So question?
Okay, the numbers, I'm sorry, this is Peter, I'm jumping in, sorry if
That's
other
okay.
people are trying to, but, okay. The numbers you're presenting here are for Maynard Public Schools, that's not the technical school, right?
That's Maynard Public School. All of our communities
Okay.
are on the
Yep.
top. Assabet's down at
Yep.
the bottom, other vocational schools. Yep.
Can
it's just
you
a
go
reference.
back one screen?
Sure.
So the reference to foundation budget of the 323,
Yep.
are you saying that state requires you to spend that?
The required net school spending, yep, the $23,323,393 is the net school spending that we're required to spend. And then we have the above minimum assessment that's also required, which is transportation, capital debt, things of that nature. Yep. So if you looked at Maynard or any school district, they would have the same layout on the Department of Ed.
But wait, so I'm sorry, I may not be being clear, and I really want to be crystal clear on this.
Yeah.
You're saying the state won't allow us to spend less than the 23,323?
Correct. And I'll show you an example of that. when
And
we
that
get-
just happens to align with, I mean, you talk about your budget drivers, you're adding 2 positions that were grant funded into the operating budget.
Yeah.
And
So here's
So
the interesting thing that we do
the
at
state
Assabet.
requirement leaves room for that?
Yeah, so here's the thing that we do at Assabet that may not be done by other communities or other school districts. We look at what our operational revenue is going to be, and then we build the budget to that. We don't build this fictitious budget that's above and beyond, and then try and fit the revenue to that. So we actually look and see and estimate what the revenue that we're going to be taking in, and then we build the budget, reverse engineer it, so to speak, to meet what the state requirement is.
Okay,
And so, you know, if we were to do less than that, like let's say Maynard, you know, or our town said, hey, we're not going to support this budget, we're going to vote it down. I'm going to actually show you that the only thing that Maynard would save if you didn't vote this budget was $15,000. And I'll show you that in a slide coming up,
which is the capital fund?
which is the 250,000. Yeah, your share of the 250,000 capital. Yeah.
Okay.
So it may become clearer as we move along. Any other questions? And I'll stop at this slide because this is the next one. So this is basically your minimum local contribution. This is directly from the department, from the state. We just put it in a cleaner version to look at. If you look at Maynard, 4th one down, 68 and 24, 65 and 25, minus 3. Your FY24 contribution was $1,022,532. Your FY25 contribution is $1,062,459, and it's an increase of $39,927. Now, I know you're probably thinking, how potentially can that be? Because we lost 3 students. Enrollment is not the only thing directly tied to this chart that you're seeing. This is what's part of the aggregate wealth model. So whether you've had either the median income, wage income went up in Maynard, or you had some businesses that came into town that cost, you know, property and stuff that went up that was more favorable. That all comes into play with the minimum local contribution. So this is directly from the state. This isn't something that Assabet does. We basically plug and play these numbers. We look at them when they're released. We copy them, we paste them and put them in this chart, and that's where they are. And if you look, you know, for example, I was just in Southborough, and I know it's not your community, but they had an additional 3 students, and it was an additional $73,000, right? And as Peter mentioned, that Marlboro, it seems like their cost per pupil is really low. It's because of the number of students they have. They have 565 students. And as you can see, for 55 more students, you know, they're on this, they got 827,000 more that they got to pay. And if you were to, you know, do the math on that, it just doesn't, it wouldn't equal up to yours why you're getting a $39,000 hit or addition when you're getting minus 3 students. It's just based on the aggregate wealth model and how it runs through the foundation formula. So that's the difference on minimum local contribution. And this slide actually, which I've been calling the money slide, kind of brings all of the things together to look at in a snapshot. So you'll see Maynard 4th from the left, right in the middle of the column there. Towards foundation, that's the $1,062,459. The net busing, if you look far to the right, the $583,296, that's the difference of a contract that we have with the busing company minus what we're getting from the state, which is 760,000, there's a 583,296 balance that then gets split amongst our 7 communities. And because Maynard is got 6.4 of the enrollment share, their cost for busing is 37,207. The OPEB trust, in the past, we were doing 35,000. Last year, we went to 50,000. This year, we decided to go to 75 because in order to meet a $21 million liability, we'll never get there at 35,000. So we've been slowly bumping it up 25. That's at 75. So Maynard's share of that is the 4,784. And the capital improvement fund is that 250. That's 15,947. That's Maynard's share. And I'll come back to that. The long-term set debt service that you see, 198,816, that is Maynard's share of the renovation project that was approved in 2013. At the time, it was a 3-year rolling average, and whatever that percentage was for the debt service schedule remains for the 30 years of the project. And I have a slide that will show that. So basically, in the blue, the first 2 in the yellow, and in the gray, right, are the things that the state says that you're required to pay as part of net school spending. The 15,947 is the only component of that number that potentially you wouldn't have to pay in your assessment. But the total assessment, including that 15,947, is $1,319,213. So that would be the total assessment for Maynard for FY25, $1,319,213. Anybody have questions on this page?
And why is our proportion of the long-term debt service seems higher than the others? Are they all set on the same formula?
So it's all base proportional, and actually I can come back to that slide, but let me go into the next couple and it will explain it for you completely. So in FY25, the principal and interest on the capital debt assessment, that's for the renovation project. We borrowed 27 million in FY16. The project actually came in at 29 million. The district took the additional 2 million and paid that off through a ban. That was paid off last December. So we have a $1.1 million payment in principal and an interest of $657,875, which is a reduction every year of $55,000. And that's based on a 3-year enrollment average. So that gets paid twice a year. Let me just find my mouse here. I lost it. All right. So the debt assessment, at the time the project was approved, Maynard's percentage was 11.31%. That was the 3-year average in 2013 that you had for enrollment. So that's the percentage that stays for the life of the debt assessment over the life of the debt for the renovation project. So you can see the other folks at that snapshot in time may have had lower enrollment numbers at the time, so they will remain, regardless if they go up or down, they'll always be at that percentage. If I go to the next slide, you can actually see where Maynard is. Again, 1, 2, 3, 4 from the right. And you'll see that it gives you all the way to 2042 as to what your percentage for the debt service payment is going to be. And we're on year 9 of that debt service payment. And again, I wasn't here in 2013 when this all took place. I think, though, at least the administration was thoughtful that in doing it in the manner in which they did, they allowed communities to be able to budget. Obviously, if your enrollment dips below what you had for a 3-year average here, it's not always a positive thing, but it also beats inflationary type percentages, right? That could have you through the roof if they had not done this process this way. So, Peter, you look like you have a question.
Sorry, I have a couple.
That's okay.
And I'm sorry, I don't mean to be riding this, but this is
Hey, it's your role.
different than it's been other years. So if you could go back a couple of slides, just as a quick question, The
Sure.
enrollment showed 2 people as out of district in Maynard. Can you just or school choice in Maynard?
Oh, okay,
Can you
yeah,
just say what
so
that is?
I didn't actually see that, but so what happens is, Assabet itself does not participate in school choice. However, if we have a student that's enrolled here that for whatever their personal reasons may have to deal with a situation involving DCF or homelessness or some type of placement, which would be beyond the scope of what Assabet controls. If a student is in DCF care, DCF has the ability to place that student wherever that student is now being housed. Okay, so there could have been a student that originally was in Maynard that was coming to Assabet, and then all of a sudden, for some reason, that student was put into DCF care or some type of care, and then the state was involved. The state then found housing for that student somewhere, let's just say Haverhill, Mass, right? If that student is now housed in Haverhill and was at a vocational school in Marlboro, that student would then be placed at the vocational school in Haverhill, which is Whittier, and then Assabet. And then what happens is it's still counted on your foundation because that was the original residence where the student was. That's their primary resident was Maynard. The state then says, okay, because you're in Haverhill, that we're shifting school choice funds to Haverhill to help educate that student. So it's just the way in reporting, but it is technically still a Maynard resident that's there.
And is the student
Okay.
attending school at Assabet or in Haverhill?
So the student was originally attending school here at Assabet, but then during the course, of their time here at Assabet, may have been placed into state custody or care, and
Yeah.
at that point, based on the situation, may have been moved out of the area and moved to wherever there was a residential
To-
bed available.
Yeah,
And if it happens to be in Haverhill, in Boston, Dorchester, Greater New Bedford, we don't have control. That's the state. Wherever they have a bed available, that's where they put the student. And then their next priority, besides having them reside somewhere, is to get them into an educational setting
okay.
that's comparable to where they were.
So they're probably at Whittier. They were at
If-
Assabet, but now they're at
That's just
Whittier.
that's
Yeah,
just an
yeah.
example. I couldn't tell you exactly where, and it wouldn't really matter where the 2 students in Maynard are. A lot of the times, it's almost a puzzle for us because the communication isn't always there. And then they show up on these numbers that the state gives us, and then we have to go backwards and then meet with folks to find out exactly what happened. So we know there is a situation
Okay.
with the student, but we're not always told as to where the student lands.
Okay.
Yep. Any other questions?
I got it. Sorry, a couple more, but on the issue of what we could theoretically cut from the budget, you outlined the capital fund, but we could also cut the 75K OPEB back to 35K, or
Nope. That's
no?
those are all required by. No, whatever the OPEB is, that's what's required by the state. If the district is saying, hey, we've upped the OPEB, there's no way to cut that cost back to 35. It's really the 15,947 that you would be looking at would be the only savings if you were to not vote the budget at town meeting.
And I'm sorry, why is the state requiring the district to do 75? Or what's the deal with that?
Yeah, well, no, the state's not requiring, but basically what happens is when the district is, in order to try and meet the OPEB liability, right, we're trying to get to a point where, we can make some type of headway. I think our trust fund right now has $545,000 towards the OPEB, $21 million liability. Obviously we're not there. We're not there for 25 or 50 years. It won't be the time I'm still here that we'll get the OPEB liability. But the OPEB piece itself, basically what the school district votes on, a little bit different, I think, probably than the municipalities, whatever that figure is, that's what the towns are responsible for.
Okay.
Yep.
And then, I'm sorry, I want to go back a little bit to the cost per student.
Sure.
And, I vaguely get the, wealth calculation that you're talking about, but, to put a finer point on it, you're saying, or I'm saying, and tell me if I'm wrong, so Maynard pays more per student because it's a wealthier community?
That's
As
part.
defined
Yeah.
by whatever state this thing is,
Yep,
whatever state
that's part of
calculation
the part of the calculation. Yep.
But I'm sorry, that's really all the calculation, right? Or,
Well, that's part of it, the number of students you have, and then whatever the Chapter 70 Foundation money, right? Those are all things that play into that total figure. And the above assessment, right? So all those things tie into that figure, into your,
Okay.
when you're looking at enrollment costs, you're paying for students to be bused from Maynard to Assabet. So that additional cost of $37,207, of that $583,296, which is the difference of our contract from what the state is actually allocating to us. We haven't got to the slide yet, but it's about.
yeah, no, I'm sorry, I'm not including the above minimum stuff. I'm just saying, based on that minimum local contribution.
Yep. And the Chapter
That-
70 Foundation, which is the state foundation money that they give us. Those are the two things that would tie into. I mean, if
So
you're trying to
just
go cost per pupil, it would be all inclusive of all of the total amount, right?
Right, but the other stuff is small, but.
Yeah.
Just for other members of the committee then, so Marlboro pays $10,913, again, just based on that minimum, the blue section of this slide. Maynard's at $16,300. There are towns higher, Northborough and Southborough Southborough's 18,500, Northborough's 18. Just to give other members an idea of where we fall. Okay, thank you.
Yep. Good to move on? Okay. So
sorry.
here's the revenue plan. As I mentioned, this is how we build our budget. And basically the numbers are just kind of reestablished from the sections we just went through. You'll see under FY25, that's the $9,832,968. That's the aid from the state, Chapter 70. You'll see Maynard's portion there of the $1,062,459, with that increase of $39,927. Each of the 7 communities are listed there. We are applying $450,000 of excess and deficiency as part of this revenue plan. That's the E&D, basically that schools have the ability to keep up to 5% of their total budget in a budget year to help offset costs into the next fiscal year. So for FY25, we're allocating $450,000. The interest income, it's $150,000, so we've increased that by $50,000. The Medicaid reimbursement is based on Medicaid reimbursement that we can bill back for services that students need. And obviously that's not a guarantee. It depends on the students that are in the building and what services they are receiving in order to get Medicaid reimbursement. So we decreased that by $5,000. So the $675,000 total that we're applying to the Assabet district, as from the Assabet district towards the revenue plan. The regional school transportation, there's the $760,950 that I mentioned, reduction from last year. So then the difference of that 583 was what gets cost aside to the towns. That's where those additional costs are. Maynard, $256,754. And then our overall balance of the budget is $27,425,514, which is an 8.5%. Now, one of the things that I can share is that I mentioned that we're relying less on out-of-district tuition. Last year, or this current year, we've applied 2.5 million of out-of-district tuition. Obviously, with having no out-of-district kids coming in this year, that number has been decreasing over the past number of years. And if you were to go back and look at presentations, at one point when I started, ASAP was applying about $5.5 million of out-of-district tuition. And the reason we were able to do that and your assessments were so low is because there were less students that were from in-district in ASAP. At one point in time, 33% of the student population at ASAP was out-of-district students. So what does that mean for you folks? That means your assessment was potentially 33% less because you had, you know, our total overall in-district population was just less by 33%. So as we're moving out and taking in less out-of-district tuition, we're decreasing that. So from FY24 to 25, we reduced it by 800,000 to a 1.7 million dollars that we'll be applying. So 1.5 of it is going to health insurance and 200,000 to electricity. And I can kind of share a little bit more with you in here so you can see that. So you can see in the insurance of active employees and retirees, right? They're rather low for our district size. So that's where the 1.5 will be. 200,000 comes out of the operational and is part of the operational and maintenance. But you'll see that's had a significant increase. Part of that is the 250 in capital improvement. And then the other part of that increase is for a phone system. We have a phone system and we have a camera safety system that both need to be updated. So we're looking to do that part of operational and maintenance. The other piece that's a large jump of these categories is in the 2000 series under function. You'll see that there's quite a large jump, but that includes the 3 additional positions. It also includes steps and levels for our teachers, as well as the cost of living adjustments across the board for all employees in the district. Okay, and those are the 2 main real categories that had the largest increases there. Questions on that slide? Okay. So any other questions on the budget? We kind of moved to stabilization.
Sorry.
That's okay.
Yes. No, can we stay on this for a little bit?
Sure.
So the expenses covered by out-of-district tuition. I'm sorry, you saying that for FY24, the total out-of-district tuition we received was 2.5 million?
In 24?
Yeah.
No, that's the
And
amount
for
that's the amount that we applied to the FY24 budget. Generally,
I'm sorry, where's the
so generally what happens with out-of-district tuition, students pay, it's a rate set by the commissioner. Okay, and this year, I think it's 18,000 and some change. Students do not have busing that's included in that, and we do not include special education services in that figure. So we collect the money, it's twice a year. The communities that send their students here have to set up their own transportation and they're responsible to pay that. We've applied 2.5 million of the total intake of out-of-district tuition into the FY24 budget. And then for FY25, it's 1.7 million.
Where's the rest of the out-of-district tuition go?
Yep, so the rest of the out-of-district tuition stays in a revolving account. That's an out-of-district account. And basically for contingency, and just like Maynard, in order to operate the school, you know, we only get paid twice a year, but in order to operate the school starting in September, you know, we don't bill out until November. So the money that's in the out-of-district tuition account helps operate the school until we get funding to basically replace it. Yep.
What is the total, FY '24, I guess, out of district tuition?
I don't have that number. I can probably ask Maria if she knows that number. She's on the call.
And I guess the same
I
question
do.
for what you're
I
budgeting.
can
for
get it for you
FY.
in like 2 seconds. I could just tell you what our first half was. I want to say it was 1.3 million, so we're anticipating about 2.6 million for FY '24. But let me just, I'm gonna pull it up real quick and just get a number for you of what our revenue was.
Thank you, Maria.
You're welcome. Yeah, it was $1,312,614. That includes our first half of the out-of-district tuition, but it also includes the special ed cost for a few of the out-of-district communities. The second half will be without the special ed cost, but it's about 1.3 million as well. So it's about 2.6 million in FY '24 that we're receiving for out-of-district tuition, which will decrease next year because we don't have any out-of-district students coming in.
Right. Okay, but it's roughly 2.6 million of income and, you're allocating 2.5 million to the budget.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. And I'm sorry, I want to go back and ask just one question on the number of students getting in from Maynard, and you talked about the, starting to reserve some slots for Maynard, I guess, is one way to say it. But I think Maynard just trying to find it now. So Maynard had 17 kids in grade 9. Can you say how many applied for Maynard or how many didn't get in from Maynard?
I don't have that information handy, but I can get you that information. So in some instances, let me go back to enrollment. 17 is the number that were here as of October 1, 2023. That's when all the enrollment foundation, that's how all the data starts. It's based on your enrollment numbers for each community as of October 1 every year. So 17 is what it was in grade 9. You could have had potentially, I'll make up a number, 24 students apply, and maybe 7 didn't get in, but they were on a wait list. You could have had 19 slots allotted, but only had 17 students apply, right? So there's a couple different scenarios. I don't have them at my fingertips, but I can get that for your committee. Luckily,
Okay.
the director of pupil personnel is Miss Alicia Berghaus, and she resides in the town of Maynard. So I'm sure she'll be
Okay.
happy to get that for me.
All right, I would be interested in, I don't know what that's going to say. I mean, off the top of my head, I would say if Maynard is paying 11% of capital based on prior enrollment, and I know that is a 3-year average of a few years ago. Right now, we're at 5.5% based on grade 9.
Yep.
I would hope there'd be enough slots for Maynard kids, and I don't to be very parochial about it. It probably doesn't directly enter the calculation, but at some point that becomes an issue, I think. Okay. Sorry. Thank you very much for answering my questions.
That's okay.
That's what I got.
That's what we're here for. So for the stabilization fund, as I mentioned, and I just want to put up, so basically what Mass General Law 7116G.5 basically allows regional school districts, not just vocational, but regional school districts, to establish a stabilization fund. The stabilization fund that we're looking to establish is for capital improvement and for capital equipment costs. Obviously, as you can imagine, as I mentioned, operating a vocational school, all schools are expensive based on the facilities, rate, and electricity. Assabet tends to open at 7 in the morning and doesn't close till 10 o'clock at night. We consider ourselves a community resource, and through our daytime secondary education for high school students, and then afternoon sports and activities, and some adult ed type activities in the afternoon, as well as our After Dark program, which also includes our Assabet Technical Institute, which we operate for unemployed or underemployed members of the community to get back to a living wage. We have this need that once was a reliance on out-of-district tuition for all of these years, and potentially grant funding, neither are of which are sustainable ways in which we should budget. So we're trying to take a preemptive and proactive approach to basically not have any type of life safety type issues come up, and then have a large bill borne by our member communities. So I can give you an example. So our renovation project, and Natasha, I see you have your hand up, so I'll just finish my thought and then we can have you ask your question. So when the renovation took place, it was basically health and safety. They did sprinkler systems throughout. It was green energy, all new windows, doors, roof, sprinklers throughout, boiler heater system. But it didn't address the full aspect of the facility, the grounds, and the 50-year-old building. Obviously, I know there are schools across the state that are looking at the same type of issues. Here at Assabet, we've got our roadways and driveways that need replacement or repatching. We looked prior to COVID what the cost of that would be. It was about 800,000-900,000. We then got estimates after COVID, and it was anywhere between 1.4 to 1.6 million to have our roadways and parking lots done. So part of the issue too is that with capital equipment with a vocational school, we're trying to provide an education to students that it's of high quality, that when they go out into the workforce, they have used the latest technology. So Assabet's been lucky in that we've been receiving grants through the Workforce Skills Grants option, and also through Career and Technical Initiative grants, which is the nighttime option. So that cost hasn't been borne by our member communities. The other thing that I'm happy to say, and I think it's kudos to Assabet, in the 50 years of its existence, the only time that it went for a capital project to our member communities was when the renovation project happened in 2013. So 50 years of existence, and we've never gone for capital. And we've always had that out-of-district tuition fund to help offset capital, offset member community assessments. So basically, the creation of the stabilization fund, which is through Mass General Law, will allow us to have up to 5% of the budget in this stabilization fund, that each year could be built up until it got to that max capacity, that we could do some type of small but significant capital improvement, or look to make a capital equipment purchase. And when I say capital equipment, we're talking $25,000 or more with a lifespan of 10 years or more. This isn't we're buying hand tools or things of that nature. It's not to buy supplies for our shops. That's part of the operational budget. And the only thing that I will share with you that is a example based on my experience, is a true example, and I'm trying to avoid this here through Assabet. I was once an employee with the Minuteman Regional School District. I was there for 19 years. I was a welding teacher, worked my way up the ladder, became principal. And while I was in that role, Assabet, as you know, had an aging building. At one point in time, they had a fire chief come in. They had a brand new fire chief. The long-term fire chief retired, and for years said this section of the trades hall, which was basically all the hard trades at Minuteman, that you just had to put fire-resistant paint on the wooden walls that were there, right? Well, the new fire chief came in and basically said, look, this area can't be operated, you gotta shut it down and you need to correct and put up the appropriate walls. So basically what happened is if you can't have it fixed by Monday, you've got to cut the power to that part of the building. That's what happened. They cut the power. Minuteman had to go to DCAM and ask for all kinds of emergency leeway. And there was a bill of $453,000 that was basically delivered to the, at the time, 16-member communities to help pay for that portion of the building to be retrofit, so it was up to standard or code of which that fire chief wanted to have happen. What I'm trying to do is I'm trying to avoid a situation like that with the establishment of this stabilization fund. Because if we have this fund and something like that were to happen, basically the oversight of that stabilization fund is through our regional school committee. They would have to have 2/3 vote because it's budgetary. And they would have oversight as to where the money was spent from their stabilization fund. From the standpoint of it being created, it basically has to be approved by all of our communities, by 2/3 of our member communities. It's a simple majority vote in town meeting. And then once that's voted and it's established, the committee has oversight. The one thing that I have been sharing with communities is we're not establishing a fund and then you never know what's going to happen with it. I intend to make presentations with a slide about the stabilization fund so you can see exactly what kind of money is in that fund. And then if we do any kind of projects or purchases of equipment, the communities would see where that money is going to. So that's really the purpose of the stabilization fund. As I looked at our 7 communities, these are the stabilization funds that exist in all of our municipalities. This was the latest data as of FY22. And as you can see, Maynard has $2,259,430 based on the snapshot when I looked at this. But the thing is, as a regional school, even though we're an extension of your town's public school system, right? Because back in 1966, our 7-member communities voted to say, let's have Minuteman provide the career and technical education opportunities to the students in our communities in a large plethora, right? We have 16 available CTE programs. I know that Maynard has the one Chapter 74 TV radio broadcasting, which is spectacular. But in order for you folks to operate 15 more Chapter 74 programs, it's going to cost a lot more than what the assessment of 1.3 million in your operational budget to do that. The establishment of the stabilization is basically a security blanket, so we don't have to go back to our member communities and still be fiscally responsible in what we do for the budget. So I know Natasha has a question. I hope I can answer it.
Yes, actually, Jillian, is this okay if I ask a question? It's about the stabilization account.
Of course.
Okay. So I was just to confirm, the establishment of this account then also allows for and you mentioned this, but I just wanted to make sure I understood the process for funding the account on an annual basis.
Yep.
So it's up to 5% of the aggregate of the total amount for each member town. Is that correct?
No, it would be a 5% of the overall operating budget for the previous school year.
Okay, and then
That
that
you
would
could be
be divided or proportionately to how you're doing. How is that formula to divide that amount?
So as in the operational budget under the capital improvement fund, that 250,000,
Mhm.
that's how it's apportioned based on what your enrollment is for that particular year. So the thing with the capital improvement fund, let's say the
So
stabilization.
if you're looking at if we can go, just say it
Well,
was in existence right now,
Sure.
and you're looking at the numbers that you have right now, I guess my question is 2-part. One, what would that look like right now with the current numbers you have? And 2, is the process, just to confirm, that this would be another request to fund an additional line part of your annual budget request to the town. So it would be your assessment, your capital improvement, and then there would be an additional funding of that allocation
No,
to fund
Well,
the
or,
stabilization.
well, actually, sorry, can we phrase it another way and say, how are you planning to fund the stabilization fund?
okay, so great questions. So basically, as you can see on the slide, the capital improvement fund, right? Whether the stabilization fund is approved or not, we've built the 250,000 into the operational budget. Basically, what that means is, if the stabilization fund were not to be approved this year, we would have to spend that 250,000 this year in FY 25. All right, so it doesn't allow us to build it up to work on some of the larger, like the roadways of a 1.4 million or a 1.3 million, the roadways and parking lots. We would spend the 250,000 in smaller capital improvements or capital equipment purchases. But the process is, we're looking to have the 250,000 in per year, and that would go towards the stabilization fund. It's
Okay.
not a whole separate cost. And what I can tell you is there are some regional agreements. Our regional agreement doesn't have capital explicitly broken out, but there are some regional school districts such as Shawshene Vocational Technical that in their regional agreement, you have the operational budget, and then they have a whole separate section just for capital that 10%, whatever 10% of the actual budget is, that's an additional assessment to the member communities. So every year, Shawshene has let's just say it's 25
Okay,
million.
but we don't have that.
No, we don't have it. So we're
okay.
basically,
So
instead of splitting 2.5 million like Shawshene does every year, we're just looking to basically get 250,000
Yep.
to
So
establish.
your plan to fund it is to use the 250.
Correct.
The total operating budget is 27 million roughly.
Correct.
Or-
Where is it?
So,
I'm down more, right? 27 and some change.
okay,
And I
so
think
that
just,
puts the possible stabilization fund at about 1.4 million.
At its capacity,
Okay.
But
What about the excess and deficiency revenue?
excess and deficiency? Go ahead. I'm sorry.
So will that be diverted to the capital stabilization fund?
No, the excess and deficiency has a whole set of rules in which you need to follow in use of that excess and deficiency. And generally, the rules is that it needs to be applied towards the next school year's revenue plan.
Okay,
So-
so only what gets specifically allocated from a line like that 250
Yep.
line is what's going to go into the stabilization fund?
That is correct. Yep.
Okay, sorry, Natasha, I didn't mean to cut you off, but
no. I just wanted
make
to make
sense?
sure, yeah, right, a little bit. I just wanted to confirm because when I was reading just the letter of the law about it, and that's what I wanted, it just leaves it open for, it sounds like what your process is one thing, but it leaves it open for how you may, I guess, ask for it or how it's funded on an annual basis. And so
Right.
it says may be funded in any year, include in its annual budget for deposit into the stabilization not to exceed 5% of the aggregate amount apportioned to the member municipality. So I
Right.
guess that was my question, is that
Yeah, it's
the
not.
annual amount, the aggregate annual amount, is that total amount for the operating?
Yes, it would be the annual amount, aggregate amount of the operating, and it's not 250,000 per community.
But it could
That's-
be up to 5% of that amount. And then
Well,
that would be,
it's 5%. The 5% is the maximum allowable limit that we could have in that account. So
right. So that's, I'm just thinking like worst case scenario. The way
Yeah.
the way that the law works, you could have it up at one point and then fund it, and then maybe not fund it for a couple of years,
Right,
if you don't needed it, right? But
right. Let's
but
say
it
it
can't
gets
exceed that 5%
Yeah.
total on an ongoing basis. So if
Yep.
you wanted to fund it up until one point, you're allowed up to 5% for that, which is the operating budget, and that would be the
Yep.
27 million, and then the formula that you use to divvy that would be what you normally use to determine the allocation or the assessment for each member town.
Right, but obviously if we're collecting and we're at the capacity, I wouldn't be assessing you to 250,000 because I can't put any more into that account.
Right. So, but 250 is not what you're tied to. Like it could be, right? You're not tied to that.
Yeah, it could go up, it could go up, it could go down. I think, we've tried historically, so I've been with Aspet now 9 years. And for 9 years, I've had the budget pass unanimously in all 7 communities, right? And part of that is because our adherence to the net school spending and not having some, we could be at 125% or 110%, but we're at 1.1, 1.2%, right? Part of that is because it's allowed us because of out of district tuition to be at that level, right? Could it potentially go up? It could go up beyond the 100% or 1.1 that we've normally been operating at. But we're mindful that we have 7 communities that we feel as though we're fiscally responsible as well. We know the challenges that your communities are dealing with. We try to take care of everything in district and not to add any additional costs to communities. And we try to give back to communities, right? There are several, I believe you have a new turf project that you're looking to add.
Oh,
right?
no, no turf.
Okay, well.
I want to make sure we're clear on the project because
Okay.
the
Well,
telephone
I
game,
should
but yes,
say-
a bleacher project
I
for
should
now,
say,
but
yes,
it's
a
alumni field,
stadium. I should say
Yeah.
a stadium project with bleachers and whatever
bathroom.
material is, yep. But that could be something that Assabet, through the skill set of our students, not
Mhm.
necessarily the bleachers, but your field houses or your ticketing booths, things of that nature. When we put our turf field in, our folks did the ticketing booth in the field house that we use to store stuff. So, we're more than willing to help with community type projects to offset, labor costs through the use of our students who will have real world experiential learning on the job in their community so they can have some pride as well. And that way you're only paying for the cost of supplies for the community. We've done that in the past. We've done it for some of your organization like the Boys and Girls Club. I believe, I'm not sure if they did it in the police department. That may have been Hudson, but we're currently in Southborough putting an addition on the senior center for Southborough, town of Southborough. And we've got some projects, kind of all over, even in Marlborough. So, anytime that, and I mentioned that with Greg Johnson, that anytime we could be a help, to offset some of those costs, we want to have you folks see your education dollars at work with our students working in the community.
I have a quick question on the logistics of if this fund is instated, could you explain a little bit about how it can actually be spent? Is this a stabilization fund that would require a town vote, or is it sort of voted through the board of the school?
Yep. So, sure. So for the establishment of the stabilization fund, it has to go to all of our 7 communities, right? First, it had to start with a vote of the school committee, who established the warrant article language that you see on that page, right here, down at the bottom. And then basically us getting it out to the 7-member communities, that's what's put in the town warrant. And by a simple majority of the town meetings, but 2/3 of our member communities, 5 out of 7, would have to vote it, would have to vote approval of it in order for it to be established. The governance based on Mass General Law, if you were to click on that top link, I believe it's live, on the one I shared with you, says that the governance sits with the regional school board. And basically, just like any financial or budgetary, that's 2/3 of the members of the school board that have to approve any kind of purchases through that stabilization fund. The only way in which, or the way to keep you folks informed or the towns informed, is through the process of the budgeting, in which I would, again, present any kind of plans or costs that were associated or approved by the school committee for that stabilization fund each year. I may come before you and say, here's the stabilization fund that was, if we were to fast forward a year to next year, here's the stabilization fund that was approved, and here sits the $250,000 that was also part of the operational budget that's been put into that fund. And that's it. Could there be a circumstance where we had an emergency piece of equipment that goes down that we would need to purchase or fix? Maybe the amount's now 200,000 instead of 250, based on, equipment needs for the shops if we don't have operational money to do it, or we didn't get grant funding for it. So there could be some of that happens, but again, it would have to be $25,000 or more if it was a piece of equipment, and it would have to have a lifespan of 10 years or more in order for us to do anything out of that stabilization fund for equipment. I hope that answers your question.
Thanks.
I think
It
Linda.
does, thanks.
Yeah, I just had a question. Previously, I think you said it was 2015, you did some big capital improvement that we're now paying 11% for.
Yeah,
What was the process there? Did all the member towns, did you have a sort of a bond bill like we did for our Green Meadows School, something like
Yep.
that? And all the
Yep.
member towns agree at that point. So that would be the alternative to a capital stabilization fund. You would have to do some kind of a bonding override.
So for the 2013 vote is when it
Yeah.
went to town meetings. Yep. Basically, we had identified or put in a feasibility study. We were put into the MSBA process that they would, I want to say I think it was 53% that they covered. And then our towns were going to be responsible for the remainder. Basically, when we went through that project, that was a project that all 7 communities had to agree on in order for it to pass. And again, that project was based on a $62 million price tag. And so if, let's say, we were asked about our capacity, and we take 300 students, we're just under 1,200 total students here at Assabet. I looked at a potential addition of 70,000 square feet to add to Assabet. And this was right before COVID. It was going to be an additional $50 million. And I knew for darn sure that there was no way I was going back to the communities to get them to pay for a $50 million on top of the, current renovation project that they're already paying. So that's not an option. But yeah, that would be basically, that's when the percentages that you saw on that capital debt assessment, part of that process was agreement that there would be a 3-year average at the time in which the project was voted that would remain for the life of the debt service payments, regardless if your percentage went up or went down. Yep. On the stabilization
In
fund,
terms of,
there's no real percentages that are tied to that like that, except the 5% maximum limit that you could be at. Sorry, Jill.
I just want to make sure Linda got her question answered actually before I jump in.
Yeah, no, that's fine. Thank you, Jillian.
I just have a quick question about the article itself. Is this something that usually there's sponsor comments or sort of explaining about the article and the potential impacts? That's something I haven't seen yet for this article. Is that something that I missed that you all?
I thought I had sent something to Greg. And I didn't put it on my slide because generally it, I'm explaining it. So I just thought it was repetitive, but yeah, we have a little, basically, a little blurb as to what I can send to you folks, and I'll resend it to Greg because
That would be great.
obviously it must have got lost, but yeah, but it's been pretty much, we were just in Southborough and Westborough and it got approved in both of those communities. And it was sponsored by the select board. So, I don't know what I did with everybody. I just lost all you. Oh, there you are. I hit something on my screen and everybody disappeared. So Westboro and Southboro has already approved the stabilization fund in our FY25 budget, just because they have early town meetings. But yes, I can get you that little blurb, that sponsor comments that goes with that.
Thanks so much. That's appreciated.
I do believe too that I have a scheduled presentation with the select board on April 2nd. Just so you folks know.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that information.
Yep. All right, that completes our presentation, unless you folks have any other questions for us.
Sorry, it's not so much a question, but I didn't say this during the discussion on the budget. I mean, just, I'm sure you get it, you know, but I just have to explicitly state, I am concerned about the overall increase in the budget for Assabet. You know, based on what you're presenting, it may well be that's required by the state and there's no choice in the matter, but I can't help but note that the Assabet budget is going up, you know, close to 8.5%. And we're not able to do that for Maynard Public Schools. And it's not necessarily one against the other, but it can't help but enter into my mind that, you know, that's the situation we're in. And that's the reality we're facing. So I just have to note that, and, you know, would hope that future budgets are not going to be in the 8.5% range. So,
Yeah, so
don't
what I
know
can,
if you-
yeah. No, I completely hear you, and I think, you know, if I go back to that, if I went back to the slide that showed you with the 1.8, right? So that, just that 1.8 slide, if I can just share that one more time with you, let's see if I can find it here. And maybe this will help. Let's see, right here, this slide right here, okay? So I had mentioned that our budget was increasing 2,137,140. That's on this slide right here. You can kind of see it. I just highlighted it, right? That's
Yeah.
that's the 8.5%. So based on the 48 additional in-district students, right? The state is saying that in your Chapter 70 funding, they're going to give us an additional $738,035. For the minimum local contributions, because the 48 students come from our in-district communities, right? And again, I wish I could explain that formula to you about minimum local contribution, but it's basically 50% wealth and 50% median income, aggregate wealth model, 50% wage and 50% wealth in the community. What they're saying is it's a $1,153,548 increase based on those 48 students. And even on your -3 students, there were some variables that happened in Maynard that the state said, hey, you should be paying an additional $39,000 from what you paid the year prior, even though you have the 3 less kids. And then the transportation piece, you know, so with these figures that you see just on this slide, 1.885447 is beyond Assabet's ability to change. We cannot do anything to change these numbers. That's what the state is basically sharing with us. Unless we violate our regional agreement and we violate state regulations and not let any more in-district kids come in, which I'm not willing to do, because as a superintendent, I have a license that I've got to, you know, uphold and maintain. So what I can tell you is this trend will probably continue for the next 2 years, as we have, if I went to the enrollment slide, you would see just quickly in the junior and senior years here that in the junior and senior years, you can see we've got a few in sophomore, right? So we're always going to have a few students from out of district that these folks have transferred in sophomore year. All right, the 3933. Or they were part of, or they may have been part of the process. So we'll always have a small handful of out-of-district kids, because even our in-district kids at times move out of district. And if they're going into 11th grade, whatever town they go to, they're like, you know what, we don't want to have you leave your high school education with 2 more years to go, or you're a senior. They're not going to force them to leave the Assabet. So they sign off and that community pays. At that point, when they move out of Maynard, you folks aren't responsible for them, right? But for the next 2 years, grade 11 and 12, you'll see there's some pretty significant numbers of out-of-district kids that are taking up spots, right? When June comes, let's see, 66 students from out-of-district that's listed under grade 12, those 66 students will be gone in June, which means there's another potential of freshmen coming in, right? That the in-district student population then increases by 66 students. And then the same thing will happen in grade 11. So we've got 2 more years of this trend happening. And I know some of you folks have just joined or you have, I don't know how long you've been on the finance committee, but there are some new faces that I have not seen before. But I have been speaking about this trend even prior to the establishment of a stabilization fund. Probably 4 years ago, I started, or 5, that this trend was happening because we've seen our increasing numbers of in-district kids. And it's for various reasons as to why that's happening. On the news, folks are saying, hey, you don't necessarily need to go directly to college anymore, right? You can do X, Y, and Z. You can go to vocational school. During COVID, we happen to have the ability as a singular district with very large spaces to have kids come back in during COVID, September of the COVID year, 2020, right? And believe it or not, that made our enrollment increase because parents wanted kids back in schools. So our freshman numbers kind of went through the roof. Between vocational schools who had brought our kids and were able to come in on an every other week based on their technical programs, and the other educational institutions were, parochial schools as well. So that trend, basically that first slide I showed you was what the state was saying, hey, this is what we're going to fund you through Chapter 78, and then your minimum local contribution, this is what it is. The 251,000 delta, that's really in the capital improvement fund. And like I said, of all the things, that would be the only thing potentially that we would cut for the budget. We're literally, I know it doesn't look like it when you see an 8.5% increase, but we're really at a bare bones budget. And the other thing I didn't mention when I mentioned special ed, because we get regional transportation reimbursement, we do not have the ability to access any circuit breaker money for special education services. That's one factor that we are not able to access. So I see Natasha has her hand up.
I can wait until, I don't know, I know FinCom, this is primarily that for them. I just I had a question about the positions, but Peter, I don't know if you were finished.
No, thank you for the explanation. I get it. Doesn't change the
No, I
bottom
know.
line numbers as I look at them though. So, but, okay, thank you.
Yeah, and Maria, I don't know if you had a follow-up to my
I
comments.
do. I just have, I think Peter's question is super valid and very fair. And like Ernie explained, this is a trend that's going to happen for the next 2 years. The other factor in this trend is that we're also taking more in-district kids, which means the transportation cost is going to rise. FY25 is our last year of the transportation contract. And from what I hear from other business officials in the community is that those rates are going to go up significantly from what we had prior to COVID. So that's going to be another factor that's going to be a little bit, it's going to shift a little bit. And so I think it's just good to prepare and kind of get an understanding of all the factors involved. But I think to Ernie's point is we are pretty much at a bare bones of like what's required. And, you know, Maynard's numbers could go up, and hopefully they will, but they will come with a higher assessment in various, you know, from transportation and just the minimum local contribution. So I think it's good for you guys to be prepared to explain that, or I mean, we can explain that as well, but to the board itself or the town itself. So I think it's a very good question, and I think it's a very fair concern. It's very valid, and we're very well aware of it, and we know we have to tread really slowly because the numbers are shifting significantly in a way that is kind of beyond our control because we're having more in-district kids.
So I just wanted to, I had 2 questions and then maybe a comment.
Sure.
First question was, as you're on this theme right now that's talking about preparing, and Maria, that was really, really helpful, I think, for you to convey some of those trends. I wonder if when you think about when we talk about how to prepare, I think if any way you can articulate that to the community in a more targeted way, I think would be helpful. So when we talk about, like, for Maynard Public Schools, like, we can say our trends are looking at this, but people who don't look at your budget and see that on an ongoing basis, you know, maybe like twice a year for like our residents,
Right.
or whatever that might be. I think when you make mention of tying the 2 points where lower in district, like the correlations, lower in or lower out of district students means higher assessments because we're accepting more, and like that, I think you need to almost connect those pieces a little bit more clearly to communicate, like the transportation. Do you is all of transportation covered, or do you set rates where because I know that Maynard can have rates, and we've done analysis on an annual basis of, transportation costs are certainly high across the board for every, any community. But has there been opportunities to increase rates of what you to users, or whatever that might be, like for multiple students, or how has that been reviewed on an annual basis? Or do you not charge any transportation?
We don't charge transportation rates to like individuals themselves. It's just through our assessments through the member communities. And then the other question I did get recently was like, how much do we charge per student, which we also don't do. It's based on the percentage of students. And then we take our full transportation expenses, reduce what we anticipate for reimbursement, and then, divvy it out across the communities. Which, like I said, it will increase as well over the next couple of years. And then hopefully it will plateau. Like in 2020, FY28, we should see kind of like the trend. The numbers won't be as drastic, but like to Natasha's
So
point,
basically you're saying that your assessment subsidizes the full transportation costs for families, whatever is not reimbursed by the state.
correct.
Correct.
So, and I guess my question, just in follow up to that point, is that I think because transportation costs are so, does anything prohibit you from charging a fee? Because I know Maynard, and we're a small town, we still charge a fee for families. We know that we subsidize a lot from our operating budget, so it's not really, we don't pass on the full cost to families,
Mhm.
but we certainly, it's not a free service across the board because it does. So I'm just curious, are you able to evaluate because it's going to be going up, are you restricted to not being able to charge any fee?
Yeah, so I'll
Yeah,
take
leave
that.
up to Ernie. Mhm.
Yeah, I'll take that because Maria has been with us for 3 years now, right? Coming up to 3 years. But yeah, it's been a conversation that when I first came into Assabet, I had actually looked at a couple different things. And that was transportation and special education, on whether or not even special education should have some a la carte based on the communities and based on the students coming from those communities, so that all communities aren't being borne the costs completely across the board. But the question on transportation is, they had already felt that basically a student that's made a decision to come to Assabet, they shouldn't have additional cost because they're basically paying in time in which they're on the bus to get here. back and forth, that would kind of put some undue pressure on the students and the families. Obviously, comments that we hear tonight and from our finance committee's meetings and our select board meetings, I will bring back to the committee to talk about some of the concerns. And obviously Pam, she was on the call. I'm not sure if she still is, but we will, I'll bring that up to the committee that's been a concern, that maybe with the rising transportation costs, there should be some,
I mean, every standalone district or even regionalized, they've had to reassess because one, it's just getting drivers is
Sure.
also, a challenge, but the costs are just going up. And so some services, some towns no longer do service, within a certain location, proximity to the school, they won't even offer
Right.
it
Yeah.
because it's just, the availability. So I'm just curious if there's some type of analysis that Assabet has done or can do that looks at what your member towns are actually charging for bus fees locally, like for themselves,
Mhm.
and what other vocational schools are potentially charging their residents as well. Because I know, charter schools certainly charge quite a bit, $2,000 or whatever. I mean, that's AMSA and they're in Marlboro, but I know it's a little different, but just to give you a context, and they charge that, they pass the full cost on to families per student. So it does feel like Maynard isn't able to absorb the full cost. So it does feel a little bit disproportionate that, we're having to assess the full cost, even though that's not a service we can even provide ourselves in our own town, and we're a lot smaller. So that's one feedback I'd want to pass on, or just question if you do have some data on that. I think that would be helpful to circulate. This particular one, actually, the staffing,
Thank you.
the athletic trainer, if you could speak to that and the elective instructor, a little bit about what the decision was about these particular roles. I know the athletic trainer in particular, and I don't, certainly in no way, this has been hard. Maynard's been asking for this position in our own
Yep.
district for a couple of years, and so I wanted to understand. I would love for us to be able to build it into our own budget. So I'm just curious on, what the thought process is now that you're building it into your budget, and what the cost savings that, what the decision is, that you feel
Sure.
that it's necessary at this point. And
Yeah,
then what
sure.
a role for the athletic instructor versus a counselor might be. What are the difference in that regard?
Sure. So the athletic trainer, one of the things that we've had, obviously, like I had mentioned, but COVID, we were in person and we were creating cohorts, and we didn't have any sports the entire year until the spring session. We had a athletic trainer that was like part teacher / athletic trainer that was on staff. What we found is that it's difficult to find somebody that will do it on a half-time basis like that.
Yeah.
And so we even tried to look at contracting athletic trainers. We have been surviving by hiring EMTs. However, the only thing an EMT can do at a game, in which games that an athletic trainer is required, or some type of emergency personnel, the only thing an EMT can say is if you're hurt or not hurt, and whether or not you should be going in the ambulance or not. They can't tape a student up. They can't help with exercises or stretching or PT or whatever, that type of stuff, or to prep at all. So that's where we saw the need, and it's been a couple of years since we've had the athletic trainer. We think that, we trying to put it as a full-time, so that way it's a little bit more enticing, that somebody would maybe pick it up. I think one of the athletic trainers we had before was like a part-time mom, so she was pretty much home all day, and then was able to get out of the house in the afternoon and on the weekends, and it worked. But then, of course, she was going to become a mom again, and it was going to be too much, so she had to step away. So that was the reasoning behind the athletic trainer. It's just you can't find contractors to do it. And nor can you have the effectiveness of an athletic trainer for our sports that require it if you're not using an athletic trainer and you're using an EMT. The elective instructor, we had at one point in time 4 phys ed and health teachers. We have 2 at this point in time. So the elective instructor, and we also had 2 art teachers at one time. And so we have been living with the potential of strained phys ed type classes. So obviously, if we are looking to make sure we meet the needs of what the requirements out of the state, we'd be looking at potential health phys ed. And then I had mentioned also with the art instructor, but we wouldn't know that because basically for us phys ed, we do it in the upper grades as electives, but in the freshman sophomore years, they're required. But electives, the troubling thing with gym, it's required, but there's no time component that's attached to gym.
Yeah, we went through this recently with the same thing about
I'm
adding.
sure you did. As much as we want to just, as much as we don't like the regulations that kind of bind us, at this point in time, we'd like them to give some guidance that says, make it 100 hours or, so there are some schools I know, they take the kids out and they walk around the track one day the entire year and they call it gym. It's not like it was years ago. So we'll make that determination based on the student requests that we get for their scheduling for next year. And that generally gets done in the May timeframe. So we don't have a determination of, is it a phys ed health teacher or is it going to be an art teacher at this point? We've been handling the art piece with other educators that have an interest in art and have some skill set, but they're teaching less than the 20% as DESE allows them to teach an additional period to alleviate some of the art class sizes.
Okay. Thank you so much. I just wanted to
Yeah.
also thank you. I know that you guys do a lot there and you have a lot of people and stakeholders, so appreciate the
Thank you.
work that you do.
Thank you. Great questions tonight. Great questions.
All right. Any other questions or comments from the committee? All right. I think I'm not hearing any. So we would like to thank you very much for taking the time out of your busy schedules to come and talk to us about the budget and also the article. Would greatly appreciate if you could forward those comments on the article sometime in the next couple of weeks.
Yeah.
We have to supply the FinCom's comments by April 9th. So if we could get it before then, it would be much appreciated.
Yeah, my plan would be to get it to you before the end of the week. One more thing
Thank you
to
so much.
check off my list. So, all right. Well,
All
in
right.
closing, once again, thank you all for your time. As always, it's a pleasure to come before you. And we thank you and the community of Maynard for their continued support.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, folks. Have a good
Have a
night.
great night.
Thank you. Good night.
So I think we'll spend the rest of the meeting talking about the annual town meeting articles. So discussing those, if there's any that we are prepared to vote on, we can do so. Right now we have one more meeting until our comments are due. So we have a meeting expected on April 8th. We could potentially add one on April 1st if we think we need it. The challenge, I'm bringing up I have a bunch of windows open here. So the challenge is that we have a lot of articles. So if we look on board docs, let's see if I can share my screen. We have A all the way to, I think it's AC. So there's quite a few articles this time around. I also shared with you in the email as well the free cash updated free cash analysis from Greg. And this FinCom article Excel sheet was sort of from our last meeting. We talked about who would be taken a stab at that first draft of the written article. I included our written comments from 23 from last year, so you can sort of see what had been written in the past to get an idea of the language that might be helpful for our first draft. And I started making draft comments for FY24 here in the last one, which I can pull up. So, and these are all on board docs, so sometimes it's easier to look at these. So all of these should have been sent with the sponsor comments to Greg, but we do not have all of them yet. The citizens petition should have come in last week. I have not heard that there have been any for this ATM, but Greg has been away, so I'll follow up with him. And right now, our deadline that we're running up against is this, having our written recommendations and our votes for the printed warrant to be like included as a handout at the meeting by April 9th. So I can bring up the spreadsheet, or I can bring up the Excel sheet. So this is.
Can I ask a clarifying thing?
Yes.
Okay, so I was going through the articles compared to the list. And correct me if I'm wrong or I'm somehow missing it, but we don't have an article yet for the free cash, for operating budget, for the general fund budget. We don't have an
No,
article for the
nothing.
transfer for ambulance receipts yet. We don't have
Nope,
an article
we have
for
no-
revolving funds yet.
Nope.
There's
is
the
correct.
question about an extra CPC article, but we don't have language on that yet.
I just got a new, they're requesting for, that was included in the email. I don't know what number it is, so I just called it I2 because
Oh, I didn't
that was
see
their
that.
other,
So you think there is a draft of that somewhere?
there is, I can open it.
Okay,
They're basically
fine.
asking to extend funds that had been given in a prior year because they have
Yeah,
to spend
okay.
it within a certain amount of time.
but
And they're
then
asking
we have
for more
no,
time.
we have no article yet on the MSBA reimbursement transfer
Nope,
and nothing on rooster prohibition. Oh my God.
correct. We have
Okay.
none of these are,
All right,
so
just checking.
I think this is like the latest, since I've been on the committee for several years, this is the latest that we've not had some of these very important key articles. And I'm not entirely sure, and I've been pushing back on Greg being like, we have a single meeting and you haven't given us any of these drafts of any of these articles for us to review, to vote, and make comments on and ask questions. So I'm pushing back,
So-
saying that April 9th deadline is pretty unreasonable.
Yeah, but one of the things we can push back on is they should spend, I don't know what it would be, but another $300 and print the warrant later. This idea that they have such a ridiculously early deadline for the warrant, is all about, oh, we have to send it to the printer a month ahead of time. I mean, anybody can print something overnight at Staples nowadays. So I find this a somewhat ridiculous argument. And I think it may be this year Greg's got to suck it up and send the warrant out later. So, I
Yeah.
don't know what other people think, but I think you got to communicate that to him as the chair, saying this is just nuts. And there's no earthly reason you need comments to be printed, basically a month and a half before town meeting. Anyway, sorry.
But then our next
I
meeting,
can tell them too,
agree.
but and tell the select board also. This is crazy.
I mirror your sentiments.
I agree. It feels really rushed. And then our comments might not be
Yeah.
as thoughtful because we're like rushed to get them through.
Right, and I mean, we're tasked with, doing diligence on these articles, and how can we do diligence on them
Yeah.
if we do them well?
Right. Right.
And then part of it
my
is,
main opinion.
I mean, the comments are important, but our recommendation should be the, overriding thing. We
Yeah.
don't, we haven't really even seen the final budget yet. That's the most important thing, and we're supposed to make a recommendation, so.
When is your hearing normally? When do you have it scheduled?
May 13th, May. It's in May.
Yeah, May 13th will be the
It's always
hearing.
the week before a town meeting.
Right. Okay.
Yep.
But thank you, Jillian. This spreadsheet though is super helpful and I want to thank you for it. I know I emailed you today, like, oh, who's doing what again? 'Cause
So I think I emailed, in that email, there was probably like 20 or 30 files because each article is a different thing. So
Yeah.
that's also why I put a link to Board Docs, because for me, it's easier to look at it on Board Docs
Yeah, I
than
agree.
as an email attachment.
Yeah, but thank you for
Um,
putting it together.
No worries. So this is sort of what we talked about last time. And we also got 3 new articles that I've never seen before. And I don't actually have the articles. I just have the names of them, about transfer of certain monies between funds. So this, I wanted to flag for everyone's notice too. This was sort of in the list, but I don't, those are things that I just shared with that past email. So there's also 3 new articles here. So we did get drafts of those with sponsor comments. So there's quite a few articles. There's like 30 articles. And for some reason, the debt exclusion is still here, but my understanding is that goes to the STM. So not this town meeting.
Wait,
So
is you really different than AC? Don't seem like the same article to me. So I'm looking.
the water retained earnings. They are 2 different articles.
Yeah, okay, sorry, yep. So you
So
is
they're slightly different.
to put 500,000 in basically a, reserve fund. And then AC must be to spend actual stuff on projects.
Yeah. So so I took this spreadsheet that we talked about last time. I put it into this comment thing. So this is sort of how we've written comments in the past. Usually as the committee, we would either say recommends or does not recommend when we vote. And then there'll be like a sentence under it. So in the past, some of these routine ones, the sentence has been pretty similar in the past years. We can always update it if we want. But for example, the town report acceptance this is an annual procedural article to accept reports from various town committees. So it can be short and crisp like that, and that would be our sponsor comment. So, for example, I think one of the things that was in there was the salary administration plan. So and I can bring all these articles up, but and these are things that I started to write, some of the ones that I was looking at, and we can use this. We can't use it as a live document because then that would be considered violating open meeting law, like one document that we could all access at the same time. But this is something you can use to write in your part, or write your part in a separate document, and that's totally fine. And I can circulate it to the rest of the committee. in between meetings. Some of them we're going to write live, like the general fund budget, but I don't have the article yet. So we could potentially go through the articles we do have, discuss them as a committee, and just go down the list. Like, are people familiar enough with the articles that we could potentially vote on some, is what I'm asking for a feeling from the committee tonight, because we have about 30 articles.
Yes.
Yeah, I think we should too.
I agree.
And is it possible, do we have to vote on each one singularly, or can we group them like they do at town meeting? Or is it just easier to vote on each one?
We can group. I think it's easier to vote on each one.
Okay,
Since we'll have to make comments on each one, I think I agree with that.
But Can I suggest we not focus as much on the comments right now and go
Sure.
through them more? Because I mean, a lot of the comments, you know, some of the easy stuff, you just copy it from last year, and then the meaty
Right.
ones, people
That's what I
know
tried to do
what's
for the
assigned.
routine article.
Yeah.
Okay,
So,
and then, yep,
no, sorry, I was gonna start and make a motion that we recommend Control A. But I cannot
Alright.
do that if you want to wait, if you're,
no, that's fine. I'm thinking of the logistics in terms of our written comments, or at least our notes. I think we take down who motions, who seconds, and then we don't necessarily have to record in each individual person, just the number of yes, no's. Does that make sense with English? I'm getting really tired.
I actually thought we did have to, I mean, if it's a 7-0 vote, obviously not. But I thought we had to, you know, have in the minutes who voted against, if that was the case. That the remote the remote meeting stuff requires a roll call vote for this stuff. I think that roll call has to be in the minutes.
Okay, that was my clarifying question, if the roll call includes the name of the person who votes one way or the other.
Yeah, I don't think we need to name everybody on, you know, I think if we, well, presuming somewhat, but I think if we name those people who vote against the routine stuff, that would be fine, then it'll be obvious. But I wouldn't expect
Okay.
there'll be many votes against it.
I'm not sure that that's what we've done in the past, but that is acceptable since it does say roll call vote in the Zoom sheet here. Okay. All right, so Peter has made a motion to accept Article A.
To recommend Article A, sorry, but
Recommend, okay.
Yep.
I will make a second to recommend. Is there any further discussion or comments on the town report acceptance? No, all
do
right.
people know what this is? People are looking for flexed.
Yeah.
So
This
this
is
is not,
is-
this is an article that allows various committees to report to town meeting about their status. There may be some report from the Bleacher Committee. There may be some report from the Green Meadow Committee. This article allows town meeting to hear these reports.
Okay, cool. Thanks.
and I see our comments last year where this is an annual procedural article to accept reports from various town committees. We probably had that, but that's what we said
Correct.
and we
Yep.
recommended,
Yep.
yep.
I think I got a little bit thrown, Peter, when you were talking about how we don't have the budget yet, and like we don't have this thing and that thing, and I was just one thing, oh, we don't have the reports yet, but this is literally to accept them at the town meeting. This isn't something where we're missing anything, right?
Correct.
Okay, thanks.
All right. Any further clarifying questions? Every question is a lovely question, and I appreciate them. All right. So I will take a roll call vote to recommend. Katie,
Yes.
Linda,
Yes,
Nathan,
Yes.
Peter,
Yes.
Khadijah,
Yes.
and I am also a yes. And I don't think Kevin's on the call. So that is a 6-0 to recommend. Okay.
And
All right,
did we
I'll
get
make a
Linda?
motion.
Did we get Linda?
yes, I
Oh.
voted yes.
Sorry. Okay. Just taking my notes.
I'd make a motion to recommend Control B, the obsolete equipment.
I will
This is
second.
another, okay, this is another procedural one. It just allows the select board or the town manager potentially to dispose of and sell obsolete equipment. At various times, we've asked for a report on how much was sold in the prior year, and the number is most often 0 and, you know, always under 1,000.
I,
All right.
I
so
move to approve. I move to recommend.
So we had Peter recommend and
Oh, sorry,
Nathan
I
recommend,
second the
from
I
my
second,
understanding.
I second.
So Nathan has already seconded it.
Oh, sorry, I'm behind.
That's okay. All right. So Peter made the first motion. Nathan seconded
Yep,
it. So
got it.
we're into the votes now. Okay. So Katie,
Yes.
Linda,
Yes,
Nathan,
Yes.
Peter,
Yes.
Khadijah.
Yes.
I am also a yes. So that is also 6-0. All right.
I'll make a motion to recommend Control G, the FY 2025 salary administration plan.
What letter is that? Sorry.
D. I think that's
D.
the salary admin plan. Yep.
D is in dog.
Oh, yes. Sorry. I'm like, wait a minute. We just did B. Okay.
So this, well, actually, perhaps I should allow a second if anybody wants to second that.
I will second this. I will second
So
D.
most town salaries or payment of wages are governed by either a union contract or a specific contract with the individual, AKA the town administrator or police chief. There are a few part-time people that are paid, you know, according to this schedule. And it basically just gets legislative authority for the range of what we're paying people.
And I think in this table, like in the sponsors comments, it says the veteran agent's salary increased. I think the minimum and maximums are the same from last year, but I didn't have a chance to double check.
I'm just looking at last year's and it's the same except for the veterans agent.
Okay, thanks for that clarification. All right, so sorry, I heard that Peter has recommended and Katie has seconded, and we jumped
Correct.
into discussion. Is there any further discussion or questions? All right, hearing none, I will also take a roll call vote to recommend control Article D. Linda,
Yes,
Nathan,
Yes.
Peter,
Yes,
Katie,
Yes.
Khadijah.
Yes.
All right, I am also a yes, so that is also 6-0. Okay. We do not have the general fund yet. We do not have free certified cash yet. We do not have ambulance receipts yet. Yep, we don't have G yet either, so we don't have the revolving funds. We do have H. So H is the CPA budget.
I'll make a motion that we recommend Control H.
All right, so Peter has made a motion that we recommend.
I will second that motion for Control H.
All right, and Katie has seconded. Is there any discussion or comments on this article?
Just as a refresher, this is the article that allocates money raised by the CPA surcharge in 2025. It doesn't actually fund any specific projects except for payment of that long-term debt, which is the golf course. But really it just puts money into reserve funds, which are then later spent out of probably in a separate article where the CPC does specific projects.
Yes, the next article is the one where they spend it, so.
I see my name is for like writing the comments for this in the next one. So I want to make sure I understand this fully. So this
Please.
is this is like revenues, but not where they're being appropriated.
It's being appropriated into those reserve funds.
Okay, and where is it coming from?
1.5% and puts it
comes
into
from our
the-
little extra taxes that we pay every 3 months. And the only difference from last year is the interest went down from 9,700 to 74, and then the rest of that difference went to budgeted reserve.
Okay, but this is annual. This one and the next one are both like annual.
Yep.
This is more routine than the next one. But just the 45,000 each for historic open space and community housing is required by state law. We have to put 10%, and then the rest of it just goes into this budgeted reserve.
Gotcha. Okay.
And the comments from the FY23, which is on board docs, should also be helpful in writing our sponsor comments for this part.
Mhm.
And they don't have to be perfect when you write the sponsor comments. It's something that we can start and discuss at the next meeting.
Thanks.
All right.
Julian, why does it say under appropriation 132,400? Is that the sum of the top 3 things? 132,400.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, this needs one.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. So Peter has motion.
Peter first. Yep.
Any additional comments or questions? No. Okay. So I will take a roll call vote to recommend Article H. Linda,
Yes.
Nathan,
Yes.
Peter,
Yes.
Khadijah,
Yes.
who am I missing? Katie?
Yes.
Okay, and me, I am also a yes, so that is also 6-0. Okay. All right, so this is the appropriation one. So this is where they are recommending to spend out of that budget, the reserve fund, for specific projects. So there is a specific process where people sort of fill out a request to access these funds. They go before the CPA, the CPC, and they talk about the project, and the CPC does a very thorough job of sort of vetting and going over that project and all of the different projects they have to sort of come to what they recommend in this article to ask fund for that year. These are the things that were recommended for this year from the CPC and their process.
Although I would note that, well, the 50,000 for the alumni fieldhouse study is a real project. I suspect the 12,000 for the regional housing for membership dues, is somebody proposed that. The other two are really just transfers to other reserve funds, so to
Mhm.
speak. They get spent by other people, and don't actually require town meeting approval, I don't believe either. And would allow, either something in the affordable housing or conservation area to happen faster by having the money in those specific trust funds as opposed to staying in the CPC trust funds.
Yeah, I'm looking at last year, they did 200,000 for Maynard Affordable Housing Trust, which is similar to this year, 190. And last year they did 11,900 for the membership. So that's about the same. And last year they did Concord Circle door replacement. They did the Conservation Trust Fund, that was the same. They did Rio Road playground design and the bleacher, $200,000 for the bleacher study. So last year, the appropriation was much bigger. It was 556,900.
And my understanding of these funds is that they don't expire necessarily.
Yeah.
So like they don't have to spend a certain amount of money every year in this appropriation part in this article.
And are we anticipating that once the bleacher fund becomes more specific, that potentially there could be more coming from them for that project in that fiscal year, or not?
They could bring an article to the STM. I think Natasha might know. I think her hand is raised. It's hard for me to see with all my windows open.
Yes.
Yes, that is correct. So we will be seeking an out of cycle approval from the CPC for an amended application that we'll be submitting to the CPC by July 1st. And so at special town meeting, we hope to see another appropriation regarding that project, which is a little different than usual and might be why I'm guessing they have not allocated a larger amount at this point.
Right. Thank you, Natasha.
Yeah, although kind of the amounts are similar, except for the 200,000 of the bleachers that we're, waiting till fall on.
Right.
Okay. So this is the article presented in front of us. We can't necessarily stipulate what might be in the fall, but it's sort of our duty to either recommend or not recommend this appropriation in Article I.
I'll make a motion to approve Article I.
I'll second.
Is that Linda?
Yep.
Okay. So Nathan has moved, Linda has seconded to recommend Article or control Article I. Is there any further discussions or questions? No? Hearing none, I will take a roll call vote. Khadija,
Yes.
Linda,
Yes.
Nathan,
Yes.
Peter,
Yes.
Katie.
Yes.
I am also a yes, so that is 6-0. All right. I'm not sure what control number this, oh shoot, it didn't open it. I have to stop sharing and actually open a Word file. All right. Peter, if it doesn't have an article number or letter yet, should I skip over it, you think? For voting tonight?
Hmm.
So this is the article. I don't know what, I'm calling it I2 because I'm not exactly sure. But
And this was in your email? Sorry, I
Yes.
don't have this yet. Okay, sorry.
um,
I not copy this.
so this is voting to extend the deadline of so back in fiscal year 2020, there was an appropriation of $50,000. So it has to be used within a certain amount of time or it goes back into the reserve fund. So this article is asking to extend that time.
What's the status of
And
the project? Has it started at all or?
I assume this will enable, I'm not entirely sure. So my understanding is that there's $2,000 left on the project. So they're not going to use all 50,000. That will go back. Whatever they don't use goes back. But this is very hot off the presses, so to speak. I just got this pretty recently.
Should we ask for clarification from CPC on that?
Mhm.
So the clarification of the CPC is wondering when the project will be completed.
Well,
The
I guess
status.
also.
Sorry, I didn't hear. Someone got cut off.
Yeah, I would say, what's the status? Has it been started? Is it in contract? Where is it and when is it proposed to be done?
Well, it says to pay for work completed.
Yeah,
Oh,
I think
after
it's,
It
so
was
there was
work, yeah, completed.
50,000,
Yeah.
No, it says.
there's
to pay for
30,000 that
work
was unspent,
completed. Mhm.
and this is to pay a $2,000 bill, and we're only extending it through June of 20 or July of 2024. So they can't really do much more with this, except pay the $2,000 bill.
But that doesn't mean that it's done. It says the work completed after the original end date. So
Yeah.
it doesn't definitely mean that the work is completed.
No, I guess not.
Natasha?
Yeah, I only add because we had the rec commission in front of us a couple months ago and this got brought up. They did a study of the front field in front of the high school. The school department was not part of the agreement to do the study, but they've already done the work. It was just a study itself. They have, the rec commission has the study already, and now they just need to pay, I believe, the bill. There's not a project planned yet for the study. I think they just needed to, they were looking to do what a field might, they wanted to redo that for a field and they had to get what was underneath the ground and all that done. So there was just a report that came out of the study, from my understanding. And then they just now have to pay.
Oh, okay.
Right. Thanks for that clarification. And that's sort of, that is what's outlined here too. Design study plans and other expenses related to. Doesn't necessarily say the work itself.
But this was a rec commission project, so I guess it doesn't really say that here, but for your awareness, I think it was the RecCom working in tandem with the DPW to coordinate that.
Okay. Would the committee like me to follow up with further clarification with the CPC, or do we feel that there are additional outstanding questions?
I'd be fine recommending this. Personally, just for myself.
I would too. So Peter, if you first, I would second.
I'll wait. If other people want to wait on doing a recommendation, I'm happy to wait though.
Can,
I don't wanna
now,
make a motion
this
yet.
one is unassigned. Can the person who's assigned to write our comments get in touch with the rec commission? Is that allowed? Say now we have to write our reasoning and we want to just verify that our thinking is true.
Yes.
Yeah, okay, so that's allowed, okay.
I mean, I guess the amount of 50,000 was already approved by annual town meeting, and this is just like extending the timeline. So I don't have any objection to voting on this now.
And
Yeah,
it's a difference of $2,000, right?
yeah.
Okay. I'm just always concerned about projects that they say are going to be done at a certain date, and then before that date comes, perhaps they will need more funds, but it's just a study, so yeah, okay.
Okay.
All right,
So the fall
based on that, then I will make a motion that we recommend the amendment to Community Preservation Reserve article.
And I will make a motion to second, potentially I too.
I have no idea what it's called. That's just Jill's shorthand. So, all right. A motion has been made and seconded. Is there any further discussion, questions, concerns?
No, it's fine.
All right. Hearing none, I will take a roll call vote. Khadija?
Yes.
Linda?
Yes,
Peter?
Yes.
Nathan?
Yes.
Katie?
Yes.
I am also a yes. So that is 6-0. Is there anyone that would like to volunteer to pick up this? This is not an assigned article for someone to write a draft comment on.
I can do it if you want. I think I'm on the lighter side. That was
Okay,
quiet
thanks,
last
Peter.
meeting.
All right, I'm gonna stop sharing so I can go back to the articles. All right. Okay, so we have, we don't have Article K. Or,
Yes, we do.
Oh, we do.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, we do. Sewer enterprise budget. So this is for the sewer enterprise fund budget. So this is control Article K. This is an increase of 3.9% over last year's budget. And the increase is a result of inflation. And this is detailing each of the line items.
So
So it's
Katie,
the
shouldn't this be the
last
FY, this is exactly the same as last year, so, and it says the FY24 budget, so I don't think this is right.
Hmm.
It's
You think
exactly
it's-
the same number. So what's wrong? Something's wrong here.
Oh, you're right. It does say, it mentions 25, but it, on
But
the
it's
bottom.
exactly the same numbers. And and then you
Hmm.
just said it's an increase.
Linda, I'm glad that you are double checking everything
Well,
against.
I've got the warrant up from last year, so I can see what we're doing.
All right, so that must be a typo. I'll ask Greg about that. All right, is,
Good catch,
let's
Linda.
see. Is Article L the same?
Wait 1 second. Sorry, can we go back to K for a second?
Yeah,
So I think the article is misdrafted and the total revenues number is wrong, but the FY20, right, that's it.
It's exactly
It
the
says
same
24.
numbers as last, oh no, that isn't, that's, one
It
number is
isn't. The
different.
expenses are different.
Yep. You're right, last year was 3305, but the top number is the same. And the bottom number. Maybe it should just say total FY25 budget, but
Yes. So I think the 2024 should say 2025,
yeah,
and the total revenues should be the 3816 number. But given this, I'd say we should wait till we get an updated one. But
yeah,
I think the numbers are probably right, except for the total revenues and the description of the budget, the year of the budget.
all right.
Okay.
So L has an even more interesting typo. We're in FY22.
Hmm.
Oh, Jesus.
it's a good thing we're going through this.
Well, Linda, did you notice the warrant from last year?
Let me
It was
look
also
at,
the FY22 budget,
oh,
which we didn't even notice last year. But the numbers are different. This is 299. What's it say? This one's up a fair amount.
This one's up almost 11% almost.
well, the warrant last year said it was the FY24 budget. So that, the last year was right. Yeah, and those numbers are different.
All right. Do we have any additional questions on this budget? I assume we can't vote to recommend or not recommend until we get a updated article without typos, but My understanding is a lot of this
No.
comes from the debt service for the new well, or upgrades, I mean, to the well 4A.
Yeah, I mean, if any budget needs to be increasing, it's the water enterprise budget.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
it always exactly balances, right? What comes in is what goes out.
It should be, that's why on the other article, there must be a typo on K. Because they weren't the same numbers here and here. So if there's no questions, I'll move to the next article and I'll ask Greg to get an updated one for us. Okay. L, M, I don't think we have an M. We have public shade trees. And I did also just get sponsor comments for this. So this is it's a bylaw, a proposed bylaw to protect the public shade trees in the town. So it goes in and talking about, you know, different features of the tree, what is a town tree, how they can be properly pruned and things like that so they don't become damaged. Let me get the sponsor comments because those I literally just got like right before this meeting. So I don't even think I forwarded them to you all. All right. So let's see. Oh, no, too big. So basically this is to protect the trees. It follows the same guidelines as similar towns. We talked to Justin. So Justin is Maynard Tree Warden. And he said that he helped them or consulted with them on this bylaw and that he found it to be agreeable. This is recommended by the tree committee. So this would be a brand new chapter into the bylaws. My understanding is there's not currently a public shade tree article that protects the Maynard town trees. So generally these are the ones that are planted sort of in front of houses on the sidewalk or in other town-owned areas.
But there are no funds attached to this.
There
Correct.
are currently no funds. There are, as the tree warden, Justin does have a fund every year that is used if there's, say, like a tree falls down and needs to be cut or it's encroaching on the wires. There is a fund, from my recollection, attached to that. But I don't think this bylaw proposes any changes in that fund.
But wait, there's nothing in here about examples of what counts and what doesn't count.
Well, shade tree versus non-shade trees, maybe.
Public versus not public.
Ah,
Mm,
In the
yeah.
in the bylaw or in this statement?
The bylaw to me is somewhat confusing, and certainly, you know, some examples of, you know, some specific examples would really help. So a public shade tree is all trees within a public way or on the boundaries thereof shall be public shade trees. The definition K, if you drop down, which I don't know what the heck that means.
I also think it's confusingly worded. However, it is part of like the Massachusetts general law. It's like literally just copied from that. So it's a restatement of state law.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not comfortable with this one. Which I'm sure is just me being stupid and hung up on it, but I also feel like they're the ones putting out the article. They should specify some of this stuff. It makes perfectly sense for somebody to say, wait, does this mean I can't cut down the tree in front of my house? I can't answer that based on this.
So you're asking for a big, more clear K, the public shade tree. What is a public shade tree?
Yeah, what does it
The
cover? And
definition.
then, you know, what does it mean? Does it mean that I got to get Justin to come over and cut my tree down for me? And then secondly, does it mean I now can make Justin take care of the tree in my front yard? And then, you know, what's the idea of the cost of the town? Because all of a sudden, all these trees in people's yards become public shade trees.
Peter, as many trees as we've seen come down on our loop, I think there's been like 30 trees in the last month. But I think that's a good point. And the age of trees is, I think it's becoming a thing, though, that people might be asking that same question.
I think it has something to do with your property line.
If it's public or private,
Right.
yeah.
Because, because I've had a tree in front of my house. I don't have sidewalks, but that tree was beginning to lean on the electric and cable lines. And we had somebody from Public Works come by and they cut it down.
Yeah.
Or cut it back, rather. So because I didn't have to pay for a private company because it was a city tree. So there should be some clarification there that says something about personal property line or public property line. And that's the difference between a public shade tree and your private trees.
Yeah, I mean, this is just the kind of thing town meeting goes nuts over too. I don't know if anybody remembers the thing about, we tried to do a fence bylaw that got crazy. Because people started asking really specific questions that nobody knew the answer to.
Is this verbiage 100% from the state? If it is, then we should just accept it as is. But that would be the question.
Well, we don't have to accept it. And just because the state wrote it doesn't mean I like it. I mean, we're modeling the bylaw on state language, but we're not required to have this bylaw.
Can we ask for clarification from Justin?
I have the contact information of the person, the chair of the tree committee, so I can send a message to them. And I mean, I can also CC Justin too. So my understanding is we want to know what is a public shade tree. Personal versus public property line is not clear from the definition. Can you explain? And potential cost of impact.
Can you also ask for some specific examples which I know it's gonna sound like I want to pick out a tree, but, you know, is it, you know, all trees within 10 feet of a road, or I just don't know what counts, what counts as a public shade tree. So I just worry if we ask for the definition, they're gonna come back and say, oh, it's defined right there, here's the definition. And it just doesn't tell me what trees are covered and what aren't.
Jillian,
So
can you
even
ask
like
them
a-
for their sponsor comments too? Because they must have a reason, why they're doing this.
I do have them, so.
Oh, you do
but I
have-
didn't get to
oh,
forward
okay.
them. Yeah. I can share them on the screen. They're not on the same document, which makes me juggle screens here.
Okay.
So it sounds like the tree committee was not an official committee, which I didn't get from that reading of the bylaw either.
Okay. And we qualify for funding. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, my personal thinking, Jillian, I would have a short lease with this one. Either they, you know, come up with some really good stuff in the next 5 days, or we just vote it down. Screw it. I mean, it really ticks me off that people would put an article like this up without a much more comprehensive effort to explain it.
Nope. Sorry, I had to switch my headset. Can you hear me?
Yep. Sorry, did you hear my rant, or?
But I
I
thought
heard part of it
Justin,
and then my battery died.
but Justin was much in favor of this, I thought. He was very involved.
Yeah, Justin said that this is this is just a statement of what he's already doing all this stuff because
Yeah.
he's required to by state law, and
Yeah.
he sees this as this is the outreach and explaining at town meeting like what he is doing as the tree warden.
Sorry, I mean, I'm just getting old and crotchety, maybe.
I had
don't
two
remember
town
all
trees in
that.
front of my house, and it took my neighbor blowing up and dying to a gas leak to get them removed. So I share some crotchetiness about town trees too.
All right, well, can we leave it that we'll, you know, ask for some more information on this?
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. So I'll reach out. So I think Nathan, you had signed up for that, so I'll CC you on that email. All right. Control. Oh, I don't have any
R.
rooster articles. So P has been removed. Q is the debt exclusion for the bleachers, which has moved to the STM. R, okay. R is the stabilization fund for Assabet, which we've talked about today. We don't have the sponsor comments yet. I would recommend that we wait until we get the sponsor comments for that. Are there any other questions on that article we would like to discuss? Bring it up. Probably. Stop sharing. This is the article I have right now. So I don't have any sponsor comments yet. This is for the stabilization fund that we talked about. Were all the questions answered tonight? All right, I'll take that silence as a, yep. So, so once I get the comments back, we can talk about it at the next meeting. then make our recommendation and vote. Does that sound acceptable to everyone?
That sounds good.
Yes.
Way too many windows open. All right, so waiting on sponsor comments. We did get S, which is the golf course transfer receipts. So this is transferring the sum of the receipts to pay for capital improvements on the golf course.
They misspelled Maynard in the title.
Yep, they should.
Ah. Good catch.
Is this like the regular like procedural like the routine thing that happens at every town meeting of just like moving it from one account to another, or is this paying for a specific improvement?
It is a new routine article that I believe started last year. The 55,000 is essentially the town's profit from the golf course, which really seems low. We should actually maybe clarify that. It's a $50,000 minimum in the contract, and then we get a share of like golf revenues and banquet revenues, which I guess only amounts to 5,000. So this has been going on for in the range of 10 years. And it had been this kind of more casual thing where the golf course would spend the money and then say they were deducting it from our share. Last year, Justin moved to more formalize this and have them turn over the full amount to the town and then have the town spend the money on doing capital improvements. So it is kind of routine, but it's new routine.
Gotcha.
The other thing, I mean, we could spend this 55,000 elsewhere. You know, the golf course needs way more than 55,000 a year. And you know, who knows what we're going to do about that. But we could also say, no, you don't get any money whatsoever, and we want to spend the 55,000 on, you know, crossing guards or I don't know what, whatever else we want to, and spend nothing more on the roof. But at this point, we're kind of going on this path of, well, whatever we get out of the golf course, we put back into the golf course. We're not putting extra money in, but we are putting some back in, clearly. So, anyway, that's.
Yeah, as I recall from the meeting with Justin, like all of the money that we've earned from the golf course has gone back into repairing it, and it's like slowly been degrading.
Yeah, so we're not spending enough to keep it up doing that.
$55,000 is not $770,000.
But I don't know.
So that would be nice.
So does
I
it
don't
put
know
a
where we
dent in
got
it
the
though? Like is,
215,000.
oh, yeah.
That seems like a lot of money to have built up.
Yeah, last year it was 175,000.
Hmm.
And they added 56,000, which would bring it to 231. So they spent some money because now it's down to 215.
This doesn't make any sense to me because if they're waiting to add 50,000 a year to get to 770, the building will be, the roof will have fallen in by then. So why isn't the town, because the building is owned by the town, correct? The golf course is totally owned by the
Yes.
town. It's just
Yes.
run by that company. Why isn't the town putting in a capital allocation for the building?
I think it's been discussed, but we have very limited capital money. And I'm
Right?
not sure there'd be a lot of support for spending 500,000 on the golf course.
But is there a purpose putting the 50,000 away if it likely will never build to be enough to put to use?
Interesting question.
Yeah. I mean, at this rate, by the time they get to 770, it'll be $1.5 million, the cost. Well, that's not our question to decide, right? So,
Well, no, it is a little bit. I mean, if we think it's silly to keep putting money in this because we'll never get there, then I think that's a valid question.
It is on the that ClearGov website that the capital planning committee is using. The roof is on that list. I don't know where on the rank list it is, but we do have access to that now. I don't remember off the top of my head.
Now, is this location like, excuse me, like Green Meadow was, where it needs a new roof, but it also just needs to be a new building? If that makes sense, like, will the roof, prolong the life of the building by a significant amount, or is it, to the point where that's just like a Band-Aid?
That's a very good question.
Yep. All right. I think it's somewhat complicated if we can put a new building on it, because part of this golf course was paid for with CPC funding, the community preservation funds, as like an open area. But I'm not well versed in the history.
I mean, I think that's probably true, but I think the bigger deal would be, I mean, God help the person that goes to town meeting to do a debt override for the golf course to build a new clubhouse. I just don't see
It
that
could be a
as having
clubhouse
prayer.
slash senior center.
Well, that, I think that's an interesting thought.
A recreation center, just instead of being a golf course, just for the golf,
Yeah.
just for golfing, it'd be a recreation center. I don't know. Not a lot of parking there though.
As a total aside, and I know it's late, but has anybody driven by Atkinson Pool in Sudbury? That's an amazing looking place.
I can't wait to swim there. I used to use their pool, and yeah, it looks amazing so far.
Yeah.
I did a tour of
be
the
a
new
rich
senior
town.
center
Yeah.
there. It was great.
Yeah.
All right, so it sounds like for this article, we have questions on asking Justin. The money goes back into repairing it traditionally, but just clarifying if, is the purpose always to put that to something that we won't necessarily build up towards? Like, is that really going to extend the life of the building? Or should we?
Those are good questions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I remembered because here they're saying they can't get event revenue because the roof is falling down. So who wants to have their wedding there? And he mentioned that, right? If you really fix it up, it might be a good investment. He mentioned Southborough did that to their golf course. They fix it up and they get a lot of revenue from it.
Yep, it's all about what we want to put in and put in to get out.
Yeah.
All right. Any additional comments or questions on Article S about the Manard golf course? No. All right, so that's S. T is the retained earnings transfer. All right, let's see.
So what the heck?
So my understanding is this is transferring it to an account that Justin and the select board can pull from without having to do a town vote if there's an emergency expense, like a pipe explodes or something.
Yes.
So that's my understanding for this transfer.
And is the dollar amount pretty standard compared to last year?
It's the same, although in our comments, we say article would use 200,000 of the, and then it has an amount, 841,013 of the sewer retained earnings to establish a reserve fund.
That number for this year is 728,000.
Okay. We
Which
know
is
that
in
from
the
the
free
other
cash.
article.
We know that from the free cash certification
Okay,
that Jillian had forwarded.
okay,
We get the free cash certification for free cash for the general fund and for retained earnings for the water
Okay.
enterprise and the sewer enterprise.
okay, thank you.
All right. Do we have any other questions on this one, or do we feel confident in voting on this one? I know it's getting late and that we're all fading. So,
I think
all
this
right,
one
well,
is
the
pretty
thing-
black and white.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree.
So I will move to recommend Control T.
I'll second.
all right, so Katie motioned and Khadijah seconded. All right, any further discussion, comments, questions? Nope, okay. I will take a roll call vote. Linda,
Yes,
Nathan,
Yes.
Peter,
Yes.
Katie,
Yes.
Khadijah?
Yes.
I am also a yes. All right. That's 6-0. All right. Oh, get out of here. All right. Close. So then we have that, but for water. So this is a larger sum, but for a similar purpose. So this would be specifically for water and the public drinking water system, so not the sewer part.
And just for reference, the retained earnings were 1.133 million.
this is a lot bigger than last year. It was 90,000.
All
That
right. Did we want,
probably is somewhat governed by what was available in retained
Yeah.
earnings last year. So just for reference, Justin's talked about this a little bit, that his goal is to build up retained earnings over time, and it will kind of roll forward. So ideally, we would spend none of this 500,000 that we're putting in reserve fund, and then all of this plus, you know, some other unspent money will show up next year in water enterprise retained earnings, and we may be able to even reserve more. I imagine the difference between the 1.1 million and this 500,000 will show up in a separate article as water capital expenses. I think. He's got to do something with it.
All right. Is the committee comfortable with this, or would you like me to reach out to ask why it's bigger than last year? I mean, the infrastructure is aging, so are we comfortable with it being, you said it was 1.3 million? That's like a
Transfer-
significant more percentage than T was.
So I'm wondering if last year it was, because it says water enterprise retained earnings capital improvements. This one is actually, and they bought a truck. So this one is actually different. I think it is different. Sorry.
No, last year was
No, I think
500,000
it was
also.
the same. Yeah, I was looking at a different transfer. This is the same. Yep. That there was a couple of transfers from this.
Okay.
What are they trying to build the reserve fund up to?
I think he is talking about 5% of the overall budget, which sewer. Well,
I
gotta
feel
be
it's an
more than
amount we
that,
will
actually,
never
then.
reach, right? It's like millions of.
Well,
No, I think I have the numbers wrong. I mean, the overall budget is just about 2.7 million.
And last year, the
So,
balance in
yeah.
the retained earnings was 1,094,000.
Yeah. So I don't know, Nathan, to answer your question. I don't know what he's trying to build it up to.
But
I need
would
to
we
step
expect
out.
another 500,000 appropriation next year?
Yeah.
Yes, but it essentially is the same 500,000. It's not that we're adding 500,000 to any fund. It's that we're establishing a $500,000 reserve fund just for this fiscal year. If it goes unspent, it then flows into retained earnings. So I think the real comparison number is last year it was 1.094 million of retained earnings, and this year it's 1.133 of retained earnings.
Gotcha.
Which is pretty much the same. I would be fine voting on this, and I'll make a motion, but I don't want to, if other people aren't, that's totally fine.
I would be fine.
Yep.
All right, I'm gonna make a motion then to, sorry, can you slide up just slightly, Jillian? Sorry, I forgot what control letter we're on.
You.
I'm making a motion then that we recommend Control U for water retained earnings transfer.
I will second the motion to recommend Control U.
Did we lose Jillian?
Maybe.
So I am back. I had to use the facilities. So I heard that Peter recommended and Steve seconded.
Yes.
Is there any further discussion?
No.
All right. So let's see. Take a roll call vote. Khadijah,
Yes.
Linda,
Yes,
Nathan,
Yes.
Peter,
Yes.
Katie.
Yes.
I am also a yes. All right. So that is for Article U.
Mhm.
All right. V. So this is the article that is amending the bylaw about the site plan approval for building in the water supply protection district.
Hmm.
So my understanding of this article, it is to clarify the zoning bylaws, or ZBL, in the town for development near town water supplies. So I believe that passing of this article will make the bylaw more specific for requirements of this quote unquote site plan approval process for development within this district. And it'll be more specific about what zone in that district are required to go before the zoning board to get the site plan approval. So adding in more specific language, for example. Are there any questions on this particular article or comments?
This seems to just streamline things, and the planning board is sponsoring it, so I'm okay going ahead with this.
Yeah, we also
There's-
had Justin come and talk about it as well. He said this makes it more clarifying, so I don't recall he had concerns either.
I will make a motion to recommend
Article,
control number V.
a second.
all right. So Nathan recommended, Linda seconded. Do we have any additional discussion, comments, or et cetera? All right, hearing none, I will take a roll call vote. Linda,
Yes,
Nathan,
Yes.
Peter,
Yes.
Khadijah,
Yes.
Katie.
Yes.
I am also a yes. All right.
Sorry, Jillian, I'll do whatever you want to do. Is there anything else we need to do tonight?
No, I think we should
And
just
then-
do this, and
I'm wondering if
Yeah,
it's
but
worth, before it gets too late, broaching the idea of an April 1st meeting.
Yep.
Which you had mentioned,
Yeah.
but,
Right. so if we would like, we could take a stroll poll. There we go. That's how tired I am.
really getting late.
I
If
would
we
be
wanna
free
meet on
April 1st.
Yes.
I would too.
Okay. All right, so the focus will be on the ATM articles, and I'll try to get all of those from Greg.
And at that point, do we want to have the ones we're assigned to potential drafts for those ones at that point?
if that's possible, that would be excellent. So that's why I'm trying to run through the articles sort of breakneck, so you know if we recommend or we don't recommend.
Right.
But obviously, some of the articles we can't recommend or not because we just haven't gotten them, or we still have outstanding questions. So, all right, so I'll schedule a meeting on April 1st. And I'll make the focus the ATM articles. Thanks for that. Speaking in terms of scheduling, there's also a proposed tri-board meeting on June 11th at 6:30 p.m. So that's a Tuesday. Supposedly it would be in person and also remote. And the proposal is for the tri-board meeting to have a focus on capital planning.
Hmm.
It would be the select board, the finance committee, and the school committee, and the capital planning committee. Is that something that might also fit people's schedules?
It doesn't fit mine. We're in Colorado hiking. I'm coming back that night, so I won't be able to make it that Tuesday, but
I hope you have a lovely time. That sounds
I
splendid.
know.
That
I'm
does
hoping
sound
too.
great.
Yeah.
I will be here, Jillian.
Okay.
I'll be here, I believe. I'll be here. I assume I'll be there also, but I may have to wait till closer too.
So you said
Okay.
June 11th at 7?
6:30, right?
June 11th at 6:30. Yep,
6:30.
6:30.
Okay. Yeah, I can attend.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah, so that was the other chair notes I had. The only other business I had was that we do have a request from our reserve fund from the fire chief
Oh, God.
for fixing a ladder truck. So I did forward that, but it's not an immediate, we don't have to do that tonight. So I just wanted to bring it to your attention. So generally how it works, it goes before the select board first. So it hasn't gone to them yet. And then we can talk about it later after we do the ATM stuff. So they're going to pay for it from their own funds right now, which will make a deficit. And then they would propose, if we approve it, that they would use the reserve fund to replenish that request. So that's right here, the reserve fund for ladder 3. So, so they're requesting $50,000. So that's an estimate, and they're going to go bid out to 3 different vendors. So I just wanted to put it on people's radar. We don't have to come to any decision about that today, but that's something that is being requested. And I can invite Chief Lawless to a future meeting, perhaps after April 8th, when we, because I think right now we're pretty crunched with the ATM stuff. So outside of the ATM
Sounds good.
articles, those are the only other updates I had for today.
I will quickly say I was on a Green Meadow. Sorry, my video's off. I was on a. I want my video. Sorry, having issues. But anyway, I was on a Green Meadow Building Committee today, and what took a lot of the conversation up is that now they potentially want to move playground from one location of the schematic design to another location, which because K-3 and it's the students that would use the K-3 playground, and I guess when they enter the playground, they're usually coming from the cafeteria or certain spots of the school, and where they then will have to get to the playground is a hike, or they'll have to. It's not super convenient. And so there's a proposal to change that, but then that brought up discussion that could be an extremely expensive change. And so they voted on funds to fund a study about it more, because depending on the cost of it, maybe they won't want to do anything. But that's now just a discussion. So nothing has been decided or voted on, other than to spend some money on a team to study it. But so that was kind of a financial update that came from them today.
Okay. Thanks for sharing.
Yeah.
All right. Do we want to keep plugging through these articles, or do we want to say it's 10:20, we're done, and we'll pick up? I'll send out the draft I've been writing, and
April
we'll pick up.
1st, April 1st.
Mhm.
Yeah, I would vote to wait. And
Okay.
I just, as we start to get into the accessory dwelling unit, and I mean, there's some meaty articles we still need to talk about. And it seems to me kind of late, but
Sounds good to me. Is there a motion perhaps to adjourn then?
I will make a motion to
Yeah.
adjourn our meeting on March 25th at 10:19.
All right. Kate's made a motion. Who's going to second it?
I'll second.
Linda seconds it. All right. There's no further discussion. I will take a roll call vote. Nathan?
Yes.
Khadija?
Yes.
Linda?
Yes.
Peter?
yes.
Katie?
Yes.
All right. Thanks everyone for staying late tonight. I will send out that meeting agenda for April 1st.